Good evening. I'd like to call to order tonight our meeting, Historic Preservation Commission meeting for Monday, August 12th, 2024. And on our agenda, we will do a presentation from Noah about the staff report, and then we'll hear from the petitioner after he's done, and then we'll do questions and comments together, and we will allow 5 minutes per person, and with a 2-minute rebuttal if we need it. Okay, that we will hopefully move along this evening.
There's a few things I'd like to address before we
Yes.
get started. Materials have been coming in, so you can find exhibit examples of the materials submitted by the petitioners, as well as the staff report and some letters that I received from members of the public on the table in the back of the room. So some of them, those are going to be addressed in this upcoming meeting, and of course, there's going to be opportunities for comments and questions as well. Feelings can run kind of high during these meetings, so I'd like to remind everybody that just to be respectful of each other. And is there anything else we need to go over?
I don't think so. No, I think we got it covered now. So, yes,
What's the arrangement for public comment?
we're doing comments and questions at the same time, and we're going to allow each person 5 minutes. We'll go around, with us, we'll go around first, and then
You
we'll
guys speak
take
up,
the
please.
public.
We use a mic.
Is that okay? Thank you. All right. So Tana, would you do the roll call for us, please?
Okay, we'll be calling roll for a special meeting August 12th. Non-voting and voting members, Duncan Campbell.
Here.
Jack Baker.
Yes.
Karen Duffy. Yes. Jeremy Hackard.
Here.
Marlene Newman. Ernesto Castaneda.
Here.
Daniel Schegel.
Here.
Sam DeSola.
Here.
John Saunders.
Here.
Elizabeth Mitchell.
Here.
William Folk.
Present.
Renard Cross.
Here.
All right, roll call's been taken.
All right, thank you. All right, Noah, let's go on with your presentation on your report, please.
All right, this is the staff report for the Conservation District application for the Green Acres neighborhood. So starting with case background, the Green Acres neighborhood is roughly bounded by State Road 46, 3rd Street, the Illinois Central Railroad tracks, and the Indiana University campus. It was subdivided in the 1920s and 40s from a 160-acre farm established in the 1840s by William Moffett Millen. Unusual for neighborhoods in Bloomington and in the U.S. in general, the neighborhood's development was slowed but not halted by the Great Depression and World War II, and so the neighborhood demonstrates a southwest to northeast gradient of consistent suburban development from the 1920s through 1960s. The neighborhood had not been previously studied as a potential district, though it had been repeatedly surveyed for historic properties. In 2007, a neighborhood plan was developed by the Green Acres Neighborhood Association that listed historic structures included in the 2001 state interim report and described historically preserved homes, well-maintained and in good condition, as one of the neighborhood's strengths. On the May 9th meeting of the Bloomington Historic Preservation Commission, 5 adjacent demolition delays came up for consideration on North Jefferson Street, bordering campus between East 7th Street and East 8th Street. Built between 1940 and the early 1950s, these houses are rated contributing on the Indiana Historic Sites and Structures Inventory. Throughout their history, the houses were homes to artists, students, blue-collar workers, and academics. At this meeting, staff recommended the release of these demolition delays because, in our opinion, none of the houses individually or as a group met criteria for designation. One of the homes, a fairly intact 1940 bungalow at 324 North Jefferson Street, had been owned as the home and studio of a significant local sculptor, Jean-Paul Dario, who is best known locally for the Adam and Eve sculpture on the IU campus and the red, blonde, black, and olive statues at Showers Park. According to national standards, except in exceptional circumstances, a site must have achieved significance 50 or more years ago to be considered for historic designation. Although the building itself is over 80 years old, Dario occupied and worked in the house from 1978 through 2007. Some of the commissioners expressed concern about the potential demolition of a block of 5 contributing buildings and its impact on the neighborhood, inquiring whether there was any neighborhood interest in the establishment of a historic or conservation district, while others expressed skepticism that there was enough historical context or public support to justify the consideration of a larger district. The Historic Preservation Program Manager shared that he had not yet heard of any interest in the district and agreed with the opinion that the commission should not move to nominate such a large district on its own. The commission then recommended that staff produce a report of the history of the larger neighborhood for the subsequent meeting and tabled the vote to release demolition delay. On May 23rd, the Historic Preservation Program Manager shared a brief history of the neighborhood, along with maps indicating the locations of rental properties, as well as the 2018 Bloomington Historic Survey map showing the locations of buildings that had been singled out as contributing, notable, and outstanding. A longtime neighborhood resident, Marinas Marino, attended the meeting and spoke in favor of designation. Over the following months, she would prepare the application submitted by the petitioning residents. The commission voted that a map be drawn up of Green Acres neighborhood boundaries. Steve Wyatt of Bloomington Restorations, Inc. was also in attendance and suggested that he would consider relocating one or more of the houses up for demolition delay. The following HPC meeting on June 13th was attended by 5 Green Acres residents who spoke in favor of designating the neighborhood. The HPC voted to petition the director of the Department of Housing and Neighborhood Development to extend the demolition delay period by 30 days to its maximum of 120 days in order to give the residents time to prepare an application and hold the 3 required public meetings. The extension was granted, and the petitioners organized 3 public meetings at the neighborhood's Christian Science Church on 3rd Street on July 11th, July 20th, and July 27th. In each of these meetings, the petitioners presented the same information on the history of the neighborhood and the meaning of designation as a conservation district. Questions and comments were taken from attendants, and a petition was presented to those who wished to express support. 2 of these meetings were also attended by members of the press. Running up against the release date of the 5 demolition delays on August 14th and the preceding August 8th meeting of the HPC, for which applications must be received 2 weeks in advance, the petitioners asked whether a special meeting could be called by the HPC chair to vote on a nomination beginning August 14th. At the July 25th HPC meeting, the chair motioned to call a meeting on August 12th, and the motion was approved. The petitioners submitted their application, petition, and supplementary information on Monday, July 29th. Historic surveys and rating historic properties. The last historic sites and structures survey to include the Green Acres neighborhood was conducted in 2018 by Bloomington Restorations, Inc. The results from the survey are included in the Bloomington Historic Preservation GIS map. The survey counted 1 outstanding property, the 1845 Millen House, which is included on the National Register of Historic Places, 5 notable properties, including the firehouse at 2201 East 3rd Street, the Elaine Dunges House at 201 South Hillsdale, and several other architecturally distinct modernist houses at 316 North Hillsdale Drive, 2412 East 4th Street, and 2563 East 8th Street. 183 structures were rated contributing, 11 rated non-contributing, and 244 structures were not counted in the survey. Many of these are mid-century houses in the eastern part of the district that still retain a good deal of their historic integrity, but BRI staff did not include them in their survey, which they had intended as a general indicator of the location of historic structures rather than a comprehensive list. Because the eastern half of the district is relatively modern, it has not been surveyed as thoroughly by state or local surveyors as some of Bloomington's older neighborhoods. While some parts of the district, like the southern end of Roosevelt Street and the intersection of 5th and Clark, have lost most of their historic structures, A walk through the neighborhood gives the impression that most of it is built up contiguously of structures that are 50 years old or older and retain important historical features and demonstrate a legible historic pattern of occupation and development. So there's several criteria that the petitioners wish to be considered. First of all, criteria 1A and 1C. So criteria 1A, the built environment of the Green Acres neighborhood is of significant interest to the development of Bloomington at a time when the city and university began to experience extensive growth thanks to New Deal and post-war policies promoting home ownership and higher education. Although the western half of Green Acres was plotted in 1923 as Highland homes and contains several blocks of well-preserved 1920s cottages and bungalows, most of the area's development took place between the 1930s and 1960s, making Green Acres effectively Bloomington's first post-war suburban neighborhood. In the 1930s, mortgage insurance, financing options, and construction standards enforced by the Federal Housing Administration rebooted Americans' home building industry. Kit houses, including the minimal ranches ubiquitous in Green Acres, were built to these standards for safe, efficient, tasteful, and affordable design. Many of the components for these houses were manufactured in Lafayette and New Albany, Indiana. Following the Second World War, the Selective Servicemen's Recruitment Act, better known as the GI Bill, offered new financial aid for veterans for home ownership and education. Facing a massive influx of new students and residents, the campus-adjacent neighborhood filled out rapidly in the following 2 decades, providing housing for students, faculty, and workers occupied in the rapidly expanding university. The smooth transition from pre-war gridded plat in the western end of the district to the winding park-like streets in the eastern half, occupied by a clear gradient of post-war housing development, clearly demonstrates the development and evolving cultural tastes of this important juncture of Bloomington's history. Criterion C. The development of Green Acres largely coincides with the tenure of Bloomington President Herman B. Wells from 1937 to 1962, a period of massive expansion in the size and academic breadth of the university. The economically mixed suburb located adjacent to campus has been home to many artists, academics, and university staff who were attracted to Bloomington for work, housing opportunities, and played a part in cultural, economic, and social transformation of the city. Since the neighborhood's development, Green Acres has consistently defined by its cultural, spatial and economic relationship to campus, as well as the development of Bloomington outward from its pre-war core. Next criterion 2, is for architectural significance, and the applicants propose nominating under criteria E, F, and G. Criterion E, here the staff opinion differs from the applicant's assertion that buildings in the proposed district contain any architectural style, detail, or element in danger of being lost. While several houses within the bounds of the historic district, several houses within the bounds were brought to the Historic Preservation Commission for demolition delay, and parts of the district are zoned for higher density development. Staff does not believe that the style of homes represented in this area contain characteristics in danger of being lost. The styles represented in this area come from 2 of the most prolific periods in housing development in the United States history, the 1920s and the post-war building boom. And the houses in the neighborhood, and few houses in the neighborhood demonstrate features that are rare or generally threatened. This is not to say that changes to substantial parts of the Green Acres neighborhood would not affect the historical integrity of the whole, or that there are not building styles of different eras, not that there are building styles from this era that are in danger of being lost. 1920s and post-war kit houses, national homes, and minimal ranches can be found throughout Bloomington, albeit not in many contexts that are so consistent and substantial. Criterion F, applicants argue that Green Acres, owing to its unique location or physical characteristics, represents an established and familiar visual feature of the city. Again, this is a category where staff disagrees with the petitioners. This is a large area adjacent to campus that has been home to thousands of renters and owners as well as countless visitors. The neighborhood is of course familiar to its current and former residents and has substantial sentimental value. In the context of the city as a whole, it would be difficult to make the case that Green Acres represents an established or familiar visual feature. Located between the 46 bypass, railroad tracks on 3rd Street at the east end of campus, the neighborhood is not a thoroughfare, and the parts of the neighborhood north of 3rd Street are not likely familiar to most Bloomington residents. While the neighborhood does contain some distinctive buildings, those are mostly located on quiet roads some distance from the street. And then criterion G relates to being exemplifying an era of the built environment characterized by a distinctive architectural style. And owing in part to the rapid development and integrity of the resources present in the neighborhood, staff agrees with this criterion. The bulk of the neighborhood was built up from the 1940s through 1960s with American small houses, ranches, bungalows, cottages, and split levels. While the neighborhood's historic period of development spans 4 decades, the style of much of the neighborhood can best be described as minimal traditional, which is characterized by the blending of colonial craftsmen and modernist architectural influences. For the most part, these buildings avoid ostentatious ornamentation and emphasize efficiency and the use of local materials, most notably in this case, Indiana limestone, which is ubiquitous in Bloomington's post-war construction. Although homes built in the late 1950s and 1960s are generally larger and embrace more modern design elements than FHA-influenced homes of the New Deal and immediate post-war periods, the neighborhood nonetheless demonstrates consistent stylistic influence. Notable houses in the neighborhood tend to draw greater influence from newer architectural schools burgeoning in this period, including International Style and Usonian design. Staff believes that this application meets criteria 1A and C and 2G.
All right, thank you, Nora. Lois?
Good afternoon, Commission and guests. My name is Lois Sabo-Skelton, and I live at 121 North Overhill Drive in Green Acres. We are here today to ask you to consider granting us a conservation designation for our Green Acres community. Why? Just recently, Green Acres was described as this. Green Acres is a charming neighborhood in Bloomington, USA, known for its clean, family-friendly atmosphere. Neighbors appreciate its beautiful surroundings and convenient proximity to local amenities, making it a beloved place to call home. And we are a unique community. It is because of our location and its modest single-family homes that we are sought out as a prime area to live. But we have serious concerns about the future of our Green Acres area. You have only to look around our city and see that green space is quickly disappearing, and in its place is either a high-rise apartment building or a parking lot. We have these same concerns for our area. Take a moment and think about this. You are a homeowner in Green Acres of a single-family home. You have invested your money in this property and have contributed to the green and family-like community for many, many years. This is your investment. One day, bulldozers move in and demolish an entire block adjoining your backyard, and in its place develop a 2, 3, maybe 4-story apartment building. And now you step into your backyard and you see a wall full of windows, maybe some stacked garbage cans, and no more trees. How would you feel? This is happening in our city, and our community has reason to believe this will soon start chipping away at our area block by block. These serious, frightening concerns led a group of us to meet and begin to investigate if there was any way to protect our neighborhood and its established way of life. We consulted with other people who lived in protected areas on the west side and in Prospect Hill. We came to the HPC and asked for help. Is there any way we can have a voice at the table? Don't we, single property owners and renters, don't we have any say in what happens to our community? We were told about the application for a conservation district, and we began to meet and research what this is about. We found we met the qualifications in so many areas, and that we have a rich history, which includes just the type of homes that are being built today for single families. We already have it. As directed by the HPC, and with great help from NOAA, we followed the requirements of the application. And members, as you see, you have these packets. We did the public notices. We held 3 meetings. We alerted everyone in our Green Acres area, targeting the homeowners, but including and welcoming the renters, who we feel are equally important. We did this by foot with flyers through the Green Acres area. If you didn't answer your door, we gently taped it to the front door. We followed up after the 3 meetings with the same foot or bicycle or scooter with a petition to ask for feedback. Now, because of some misinformation going out there, and today you know it does happen, we need to make very clear that this application is asking only for a conservation designation, not the historical designation. We've studied both and do not intend to move any further than the conservation designation. It suits what we need. And what we need and what we deserve is a voice at the table. The conservation designation gives us all an equal seat at the table, and that is why we are here today. To save our Green Acres community and its lifestyle, we who live in this unique community and have been a part of its history and environment know the value of the lifestyle of our modest homes and the yards for gardens and the ability to have a pet. Many of our renters desire this type of style and truly would not live in an apartment. It's why they come here to Green Acres, to become part of it, some short-term, some long-term. We are diverse in just about every way. We meet on the street, we talk, we pet the dogs. We watch out for the school bus and our kids. We help each other in need, and we teach our college kids, whose parents are so glad they're gone, and they're coming in now. We'll have a whole new crop. How to live in a neighborhood, a very special neighborhood, a neighborhood whose lifestyle and hallowed green environment deserves to be protected so it can continue to enrich the lives of its variation of lifestyles and continue to enrich the city of Bloomington. I ask you to ponder one more thing. The words of noted authority on preservation, Donovan Ripkema. Quote, "We are systematically tearing down what is affordable and building what is not. You can't build new and rent cheap. And every time a pre-1970s house is lost, a unit of affordable housing is lost." Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Anita. So we'll move on now to, I'm sorry, no, go
I
ahead.
believe Division Director of Hand would also like to speak.
All right.
Have you asked her to unmute?
Anna?
I've asked her.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can
Yes,
hear you.
thank you, Anna.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I would like to remind the commissioners that they need to speak respectfully to each other. Per the professional conduct in your manual, you need to make sure that you're treating everyone fairly and impartially and with respect this evening.
Thank you, Anna.
And may I jump in just before we
Yes,
get started?
please.
I just want to make sure that everybody in the room knows that the HPC focuses on the code, the state code, which are local code copies. So there are specific criterion that will be considered when making this decision. Future use is not a criteria that they consider when making these decisions. So to the extent that people are saying, hey, I'm worried about what's going to happen in the future, that's not within the purview of HPC. I just want to make sure that I set that legally out there for you so that you understand when the HPC are making their comments, that they are focused on local code and state code. NOAA's report does a good job of following that criteria when he made his recommendations, and so that's what this HPC will be considering.
Thank you, Margie. All right. Let's start with our commissioners. Jack, do you have any comments or questions at this point?
Just a couple of questions. When the people in the area began to talk about conservation district, was there
Louder, please.
was there a petition issued in the neighborhood and sent around and asking for people to basically sign up their acceptance of going toward a conservation district? I mean, I've seen that happen before. I just wondered if it happened in this case, or how it came to fruition.
Okay, you mean before our meetings?
Yes,
Oh,
before you really got too far into the process.
no. We just talked a lot among ourselves, and with that came to the HPC, where do we go from here? And then we started to design how we would, first of all, get the information out to as many people as possible, and then try to get feedback after that.
I guess what I'm searching for is, where's the consensus? Where did the consensus come from to go forward? Was it during these meetings, was there any sort of vote taken? Was it all by conversation and assumed consensus among people who came to the meetings? How did you get to the point where you got to a core of wanting to go toward conservation?
Well, as I said before, deciding to move ahead just came through conversations. In other words, we did not think particularly about getting a consensus because there was so much discussion going on, and we thought, let's bring everybody together and start to discuss this, which would be our meetings as we understood it from here. That's how we would start to gather the information to get a consensus.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the steps that we took.
Did you at any point determine sort of a ratio of those for and those against conservation district?
No, that's why we did what we did.
Okay.
We wanted to find out, if it was 10 people, 20 people, 30 people with that. And that's why we followed the instructions here in order to start to gather this information and have some, logical reason for doing it, rather than just talking and going amongst people. Let's get together and find out, where we stand.
Isn't there a petition?
There was at the end. Yeah, there is. We did one at the end. So we did gather them.
I was the person that went around getting the petition
Yeah.
signed. Just 1 second. The problem was we had so little time to do so much. And doing a petition in the beginning would have taken a lot of that time. Because we had to have everything done by, when was it, July 29th? And we started when?
What I'm trying to get at is what the buy-in is in the area, in the neighborhood, we'll call it the neighborhood, the whole area, what the buy-in is in terms of those for, those against. I'm not hearing that there were any numbers taken, but.
When I went around and did the petitions, I got, I think, 38 names, and there were others also that were working. But the people, those are the people that that answered the door. The rest of them weren't there. And there were 3 people that didn't want it. 3 people out of that, and the rest were very grateful. So that's the amount of time I had to do what we were doing, because there's so much that we had to do in such a short time.
That's all I have.
All right, thank you, Jack. Sam?
Let's see, I wanna address some of the earlier comments. The neighborhood, I mean, it's a big neighborhood, it's a sizable neighborhood, and there are 3 kinds of zoning in the neighborhood currently. And the most you can do in that neighborhood, according to current zoning, is 3 stories. Most of it is R3, which only allows for 2 stories. That's the core of the neighborhood. And then there's a little strip toward the west, but not immediately adjacent to the university, which is R4, which is residential urban, which you can do 2 or 3 stories. And then it's only along the western edge fronting the university, which allows for 3 stories. And no more unless they go for a variance, which I am sure they would give some pushback. Following up on what my fellow commissioner said, I'm also concerned about buy-in. The number of residents and owner signatures on the petition, it's not overwhelming. There's like 79 signatures on the petition.
We can't hear anything.
Yeah, that's.
I can't hear anything.
Sorry, there's 79 signatures on the petition, with I think 30-some of those being owners. So that's a
If you're
concern.
speaking, we can't hear anything.
All right, try that again. Did you hear the thing about the zoning? Can you hear me?
There's no sound.
I'm sorry, audio got shut off somehow.
All right, can you hear now? Hello?
Yep.
All right, great. Did you hear about the lecture on zoning?
Probably not.
Okay,
I heard most R3, most of it's R3, R4 adjacent to the university, and I think that's where you cut off.
yeah, okay, basically you can't go over 3 stories, that's the story there. I'm also concerned about neighborhood buy-in. The number of signatures, actual signatures on the petition was 79. 30 some of those are homeowners. And there are 244 structures that aren't surveyed in this neighborhood. It's a mix of houses that, when I look at neighborhoods wanting to go up to be a conservation district, that's another thing I'll get into in a sec, conservation district versus historic district. I look for a definable boundary, which it has. I look for a mass or sort of a density of a particular kind of settlement. And going through this neighborhood, it feels very large, but sort of thin on the ground in terms of what there is there. This was housing that was built at a time of expansion, and a lot of it isn't particularly well built. And I am one of those commissioners who says just because something is old doesn't mean that you should save it. So I think there are some things in place with zoning that will address some development concerns. This neighborhood also went and got a neighborhood plan put together where which was included in our packet, where hang on, what did they say? One of the stated goals was to ensure that infill development within the established neighborhood is context sensitive. So I'm not entirely sure or convinced that an historic district is the way to save your neighborhood. That said, I want to talk a little bit about a conservation district versus an historic district. And this is something that a lot of conservation districts that are now historic districts got pretty grouchy with us about. The state legislature passed a law where you guys, the onus is on you to have periodic votes to confirm that you want to be a conservation district, or you automatically get elevated. And the level of vote that you have to have is such that effectively, I don't know of a conservation district that is now not an historic district. So you're signing up for eventual historic district status, practically speaking, unless your neighborhood is magically organized. But it's largely a rental neighborhood, which, you know, I have other issues with this, it being the level of density it is, and the central location of it, which isn't a historic preservation issue necessarily, but that pushes some of my buttons. So I'm gonna need some convincing. So that's what I got, thank you.
Elizabeth?
I'd just like to know what the other two fellow commissioners brought up is the buy-in. How much of the area says yes that they're for it, and how many are not? I'm very interested in that. That will tell me what they want to do. And it's kind of muddled now for me.
All right, Lois, can you address that? How many people, what your count was?
Yeah, the count was what has been spoken of before. We are at about 39 owners and about 20 renters that signed the petition in favor. And that's where we are so far at this time. Would it increase? I would think so. I would think so, but that's neither here nor there. This is where we are right now in just a very short time with addressing people's concerns and learning what to do, perhaps how to take care of the problems, you know, in our area. And that's where we are right now.
And that's out of 244.
That's only 244. We're not surveyed at all by BRI, so we don't know what those.
Yeah.
So how many houses are there in the total?
It's over 400.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Sammy, did you have another? Okay, thank you. Daniel?
I had a quick question here for you or Noah, John. I was just curious, once we do our commissioners and it's open up to the public, do we have an opportunity to talk with that again after hearing public buy-in? I just wasn't sure on the format.
Yeah, we will have a response, we'll have a time, 2 minutes after we hear from the public.
That the commissioners, if we want to know more or have a
Yes.
question.
Right.
Okay, I just wanted to check on that first.
Yeah, no
So
worries.
I appreciate that, thank you.
You're very welcome.
I think I kind of sit with Liz. I'm back and forth, so I'm a little muddled, I think, as Liz called it, which I appreciate that, Liz, so thank you. Because part of me, I mean, I understand, like, I just remember going to Europe when I was in France and seeing these buildings that are 500 years old that they can still use today, that to them were these just common buildings that were just downtown, well, in their version of a downtown, that 500 years later, it's now a cell phone shop. You know, it's to me, that was simply phenomenal, but I also understand, you know, we can't save everything. I look with all the towns and all the traveling I've done, when they tear down these old historic, Bloomington's guilty of it as well, but they tear down all these homes to put in something else, and you look at the old pictures and you're like, why would they do that? But at the same time, as Sam noted, I believe, about the types of housing or the quality, I believe as you called it, weren't always consistent. So I see a little bit of both, and some of the comments I've heard from folks, as far as I'm aware, I mean, preservation, it's not an absolute bubble. It doesn't lock these houses in time. It just, there's some restrictions on you can't just come in and tear stuff down or revamp it. So I've just heard comments where people are just convinced that, you can't change a single blade of grass on these properties, and it seems more like what we've done is there's just more restrictions. You can't just add a big shed out front or revamp stuff or redo it. So I find it interesting. I'll be very curious with public comments because between the owners, especially the ones that live in the neighborhood, and even the renters, as you had mentioned, I mean, they specifically choose this place, but it is a very large, I forget how many houses did you said over 400?
It's over 400.
Yeah, so that's, I mean, to me that's a lot, but I know there's been a lot that NOAA has been great at passing along to us with a lot of the comments. So when I bike from the east side to my job, especially after the demolition delays that kind of kicked all this up, I keep trying to take little side routes and just bike through parts of that neighborhood to get a good feel. So I have a lot of thoughts, but I'm very curious what a lot of the neighbors, hopefully in the public comments, will be able to respectfully say. Because this is a very heated issue. But I think that's all. I have right now.
Thank you, Dan. Bill?
Okay, so Lois, a few questions I have. So some of my fellow commissioners were hitting on this as the buy-in. During your public meetings, did you have negative comments from people in the neighborhood? I mean, were there any, and perhaps what was the most boisterous one?
Actually, very little, and I was surprised. We had someone come who I wish I could have talked to them after the meeting. They sat there and they seemed very negative. They wouldn't sign in, so I had no way of, contacting them to see what was bothering them about this. And if I can just speak a little bit more about this, this whole idea of the conservation district idea for us, that's what we talked about a lot, because we wanted to let people know that really it's not, it's not like historic preservation. It doesn't have all these regulations. It's just, you can't pick up your house and move it without permission, which I think you have to get it from the city anyhow, I don't know. There's just two other things. If there's demolition to be happening, you have a right to, that was the whole point. If somebody's going to demolish something, what are they going to put in its place? What's it going to be like? There's just a couple of things that we as a community there, could participate in. Not to tell anybody, no, you can't do it, but maybe even help and give some ideas. I remember when I was doing stuff with my own house, and I called the city because I wanted to put a fence up, but I said it can't go this high. This great person came out and said, yeah, but here's how you do it. And you can get great ideas for that. That's really what we want to do. We want to maintain our neighborhood, but let everybody have some buy-in in it. And
So-
right now, yeah, people are so worried that it's going to be all types of restrictions, which we don't want to begin with. So there was maybe 2 people, okay, but
Okay.
that, that is not a scientific
Okay,
response.
so it sounds like not a lot of
Most,
pushback during the
right,
public
most
meeting.
people who came and learned what we wanted to do, signed the petition.
Okay. And then my next question is much like some of my fellow commissioners, big district. I'd be interested in any the thought process in why so big, why not something smaller, more confined. Did you discuss that at all?
No, we didn't, but here's another good idea while we're sitting here talking about that. We're just learning what we have a need, and we know what's happening with the overview, and we don't want to lose the character of our neighborhood. It does have some very good things in its description, The things are beautifully put together in the application, and we simply are investigating and want to find out how we can maintain this character and what our neighborhood has been about, and we just want it to continue. So we are open to ideas. There's the word compromise, you know. Eleanor Roosevelt, I am a fan. Life is a compromise. So maybe there is something with this compromise. But we won't know it till we get started, and that's why we got started, and this is why we're here today.
So I think my last question, I think it goes along with what Sam was talking about, is typically conservation becomes historic.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the biggest questions probably most people in the room would have is when you become historic, there's a pretty major financial price tag that goes along with that.
Yeah.
So now that you understand conservation typically becomes historic, I think Sam said unless you're really organized, now that you understand that and know that, how would you put the neighborhood together to the point where it would stay conservation and not move to historic? Or probably the more compelling question is that most people would like to know, if it is historic, since the neighborhood then creates their own guidelines of what happens inside of the neighborhood, how you would go about creating those so that it would not be a financial burden or a timeline burden for people wanting to make changes.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the most important question.
Yeah, and that's the question that I think is posed for all of us right now. Can you help us figure that out? In other words, you know, we need a room full of experts here, which is why we're sitting here. How best can we do for our neighborhood to preserve it, to protect what's there, and can we use this conservation district? How can we use it? And you know, if we come together, as a neighborhood. We sit and we talk, hopefully with your help, possibly, can we fashion something? I mean, you know, there's always a first. Can we fashion something that, you know, we're going to be a conservation district, and no, you can't move on to a historic district. Like I said, there's always a first, and there's always compromises. And that's why we're here. That's why we're here. You know, there's always, one thing I was raised on is whatever the problem is, you can solve it if you stick with it, if you stick by it. You can solve these things. And I believe we can. We've had some wonderful help here from the commission. We've had people coming in now very late being really upset, and I didn't want to stress or upset anybody. I want everybody in here. The bottom line is, when that demolition is going across your backyard, you know, you already don't have anything to say, and you deserve to have some say over what's going on. And that's what's behind this.
Right. Thank you. And I think, just real quickly, my comments would be, I think it's a big area as well.
Yeah.
I think that will cause some challenges. I think a more smaller defined area might be more appropriate. I think really thinking through the fact that most likely conservation goes to historic and the ramifications of that, and how as a neighborhood association that you would manage that. Because I think that's a story that needs to be told to get buy-in from the entire neighborhood, because that's where that hits each individual differently.
Oh, yeah.
And I think,
absolutely.
and then I think my last words on it is, I've heard comments about it being a post-war, you know, modest houses. I grew up in Bloomington. Moved away, decided to retire, and I moved back to Bloomington. And so this is a very unique neighborhood. There's lots of very unique neighborhoods in Bloomington. Because back 40, 50 years ago when I was growing up, Bloomington was very segmented. Certain people lived here, certain people lived here. So all of these older neighborhoods tell a story. And of course, this particular neighborhood, I went to high school with about 1,500 kids. And a pretty good percentage of them lived in that neighborhood. And what was interesting was their parents. Of course, their parents were my parents' age. And of course, they're not around anymore. But communities like this and the people that lived there created the fabric of what we all love about Bloomington, what we love about it today. So although they may be modest homes, the people that lived there created a very, very unique community that we all really appreciate. So I don't want us to get caught up in the fact that these are just modest homes. These are homes where people lived that created an inclusive environment where people from all across the world came to Bloomington, Indiana. That's really cool. So there's something about that that's very historic, maybe not on the global scale, but on the local scale. And I think there's a piece of that that needs to be preserved in this neighborhood. I just have the concern about maybe this is too big of a piece. And if there is a smaller piece where that takes place, what does that look like so it does not create a financial burden on the people that live there? Whether it's homeowners or it's renters. The people that live there, there's got to be a way so there's not a burden. So, that's it.
Thank you, Bill.
Mr. Chairman?
Let me, 1 second, Jack. I want to make a small announcement. We are going to do a little change. We're going to cut it back from 5 minutes to 3 minutes. We have about 80 people here that are going to want to make comments, okay? Jack, you wanted to
Yes,
say
I
something?
took the first round as question and didn't make comments. I just want the opportunity
Yeah, absolutely.
to make some comments. It doesn't have to be now, but at some point.
Okay, fine. All right. Ernesto.
Yes, thank you, John. I'm just trying to put eloquent argument here to point out the importance of preservation. I think we're talking about getting a little bit ahead of the game here with potentially becoming a historic district. I think the important here is to get to the first step, the conservation district, if it happens. I do think that we all, or most of us, care about the historic context. I think the preservation of our patrimony, that's very important. I think the fact that it's rental in some percentage, we don't know what percentage of rental units are in this neighborhood. I would be curious to know.
It's about 75%, is that correct?
80%.
80%.
Do we have an official number? I don't know. There must be an official number from the city. I don't know.
It's taken from GIS.
Okay. I do think that even renters are part of this plan. Renters care about where they live. They care about their neighbors. It's not a generalization about who these renters are. I do think that that's important to make note. I see it in your notes that some of them participated positively. Some others didn't or didn't want to be part of it. I don't know. I think it's important to make note of that. I do see the part of the support. I wish I could see higher numbers of support. But if you see even a minuscule number, that tells you the story that there's something behind there. You know, I see that you guys were running against time, so that has a conflict perhaps on how to collect more support for it. I think it is important to have this preservation. I think the scale of the neighborhood is such that we want to promote more home ownership. And yes, rental is great. There has to be a mix in that neighborhood, like in any other neighborhood. Anyway, that's all I have for now, John. Thank you.
Thank you, Ernesto. Bernard?
I'm sorry, you don't have a name tag. Could you remind me of your name, please?
Lois.
Lois.
Lois Sabo-Skelton.
Mind if I call you Lois?
Please do.
Lois. Lois. You said you had 79 signatures in support?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, how many of those signatures are owners? Do you know?
Yeah, 1 second.
38, I think.
I got 39, Ann.
39.
I got 39, yeah.
And
20 for
let
the
me
renters.
do some quick math.
Yeah, I'm
You said
trying.
over 400 houses.
Yeah, I know.
20% of them are owned, 80 rent or any. So I'm just trying to get a sense of what percentage of home owners, we're talking about. No, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but only the home owners get a vote, correct?
The vote takes place when there's a question of raising up a conservation district to a historic district.
Right, but to conservation district, there's no.
No, that's just how state law is written.
So there's a lot of people commenting about buying, and I am trying to get a sense of what percentage of the home owners are in support versus.
Can I speak for a minute? Because I was the one that went around.
Please.
Okay, well,
I'd be willing to allow for 20 seconds for you to, if you have an answer to my question.
yeah, I went around, this is at the end of our process. I got as many as I could, but people were out of town apparently. I was only looking at owner-occupied houses, because that's all the time we had.
Right.
Owner-occupied houses. And half of those people were gone, and all but 3 totally wanted to do it, the ones that were there.
Okay. So a significant percentage of those who you spoke to were in support.
Oh, totally.
Okay.
95% or 90%. And grateful.
I will say though, I wouldn't say a concern, but I am, I did take note of the size of the district, and I'm not saying that there isn't justification for the boundaries. I'm just saying I would like a bit more information as to why that area is so large, and if it is that it could be reduced in some way. I'd like to see due consideration given to that. I will say though that I am swayed with the staff recommendation. They've done a thorough examination of the criteria, and they have concluded that it meets, well, it depends on how you count it. It's either 2 or 3 if you count the subsections, right?
There's a three subsections.
Right, so it does qualify
Right.
based on the regulations. There seems to be a significant percentage of the ownership within the community that supports it. I do have appreciation for the fact that you had limited amount of time, and I would be willing to see what you could muster if you had more time. That's it.
Thanks, Mayor. Duncan?
I think I'll pass for now.
Jeremy?
I think some of share the concerns with buy-in, the low percentage of people that we have affirmative reactions to the petition. It's relatively small compared to the number of houses that are in there. Regarding the staff report, no, I think this is probably the first time I've disagreed with your staff report. I don't necessarily agree with the findings of significance in those sub areas. I can go into that later, but I'm also just curious to hear more from the people who are against it. I think a lot of the conversation has been from the people who are for it. We received a couple of letters and whatnot, but gathering from some folks in the audience, they also have opinions on the other side. So I'm just kind of curious to see what the public has to say as well.
Thanks, Jeremy. Karen?
Well, I find the staff report very thorough and very well thought through. I was particularly struck by the fact that there are houses that they're not necessarily only found in this neighborhood, but they're not found in many contexts that are so consistent and substantial as this. And that's what, to me, that's what conservation districts and historic districts are all about. It's about a body of consistency, of style that ties with a particular time period. And this post-World War generation and style of house, again, the modest houses are often underappreciated, which I think is a shame. And in fact, there are historic districts. For example, there are 2 historic districts in Lafayette, Indiana, from this time period, you know, full historic districts. So I don't think it's stretching our sense of history in any way. I think it's, you know, it's worthy of that. The size does present challenges. I think that's fair to say, because you're going to have people who are opposed, and that's a practical problem. That's all I'll say for now.
That's correct. I'm not going to comment at this point. So let's move on to public comments, and we'll start back here in this corner.
Oh, right, Jack had wanted to get in this comment.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jack, please. All right.
I'll be brief. I'm one of the people in the room who has been actively involved in determining a conservation district. The Gold was the first. It was a fight. It's like any neighborhood, it's asleep. Things happen, people don't pay much attention, and then something happens that wakes them up. In our neighborhood, it was parking lots, built houses being taken, torn down in a few days. There's no demolition delay. It was back in the early part of the century. That's an odd thing for me to say. But it was around the 2000 mark, 2003 or so. And they were being taken one by one, slowly, but we likened it to a set of teeth. One tooth was removed, you don't notice it so much. 2, you begin. 3, 4, you begin to really see it in the neighborhood. You see the destruction that's happening. And I think that's what probably is fueling some of the worry and why it's waking up this neighborhood. But once they wake up, then things get done. Now, we decided, and we worked with the city closely, and saw that there could be this thing called a conservation district. And we started working toward it. One of the big problems getting anything done was getting people to pay attention, to understand, come to a meeting. That doesn't happen easily in a neighborhood, and like this one, I think we saw that not that many people showed up, not that many people wanted to sign a petition, but we went ahead with it. We took petitions around, and I don't remember the numbers, but they probably weren't that high at the time, but it was something that we could use to further the process. The real worry of a lot of people was, you're going to tell me what I can do. If we go into this, you are going to be able to tell me what I can do with my windows, my doors, my color, and I don't like it. What they didn't understand, that that's not the case. It depends on how you write the rules once you become a conservation district. You can write them tight, and there are some tight ones in the city. We've dealt with a couple in the few meetings I've been to. And ours, we wrote very, very mild. It's, you know, you should have a roof type that's similar to your neighbors. You know, the height of your house and where you place it, that sort of thing. But it doesn't have anything to do with paint color. It doesn't have anything to do with really window type, that sort of thing. It doesn't get that tight.
Then there's the worry, and we had a real worry of going historic. People were afraid of becoming a historic neighborhood. And that was the one that they were really worried about in terms of, we're going to tell you what color you got to paint. We do not want to be a historic neighborhood. Well, we came in as a conservation district and finally convinced people enough and went in front of city council and got our conservation district. Only to find out 9 years later that somebody made a mistake along the way and we were historic. And it was a shock, but you know what's happened? Nothing. Nothing, no change. We wrote our rules, we didn't change our rules, and things have quieted down. I think, believe me or not, I think people are happy with it. I think it was a very good thing for the neighborhood, and it kept, it determined our future, and I think that's what these folks are trying to do, is determine the future. They're worried that the neighborhood is being taken apart by something, or something is happening that's causing a downturn in morale in the neighborhood. And what you need to see is something in the future. Conservation and historic status doesn't mean that things are going to magically get better, but it certainly keeps them from getting worse. And I think with that, that's enough said. Let's go on about it.
Thank you, Chapter Joe. All right, we're going to start with public comments, but I'm going to start here in the back corner. So if you would please stand up and give us your name, your full name for us, and you'll have 3 minutes.
My name is Sarah Alexander, and I have two major objections to the designation of Green Acres as a historic conservation district. One general and one specific. Generally, I object to a process which favors a minority of landowners deciding to subject their neighbors to high-stakes negotiation over the shape of their windows. In my neighborhood of Maple Heights, even when they chopped off the homes of the people most likely to object to a conservation district, it was still only a small percentage of homeowners that pushed the conservation and then preservation district through. This was done only a few years ago, and already, even the lax strictures of our district have caused friction between neighbors and thousands of dollars of money thrown away on little more than satisfying this body that a private homeowner had the right to alter his own home. Nevertheless, perhaps there are some good use cases for historic preservation designations. But the benefits of historical preservation listed on the city's website, ironically, lead me to my specific objection to Green Acres as a district for historic preservation. I quote, "Cities are for people, not vehicles." According to the petitioner's own application, the story of Green Acres is the story of the rise of the suburb, of automobile supremacy. You can look at a map of Green Acres, which is necessarily a large area, and follow the destructive path of post-war development. In the Southwest, we see gridded streets and alleys, but by the time you reach the east side, you see the beginnings of the disconnected, winding style of development that has transformed the edges of this city into unsustainable sprawl. If we preserve this neighborhood as it is, we preserve the mistakes we made and continue to make. Why not, if not encourage, at least allow this neighborhood, and others like it, including my own, to adapt to the future needs of people in the natural way of thriving cities? I can answer this question. We are here today not because we are in danger of losing some vital part of Bloomington's history, but because a handful of residents are scared of undergrads. That's it. Thank you for your time.
No comments? Sir?
I pass.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Bridget Savage, and I'm a retired teacher, so I'm hoping you can all hear me, okay? I grew up in Bloomington, among other places, but Green Acres is very familiar to me, as are many of the small neighborhoods and large neighborhoods around Bloomington. Several things, I've been taking notes. Several things that have come up is, on one hand, with this conservation district, we're asked not to look at the future, but on the other hand, I'm hearing a lot about the future, like when it becomes a historic district. But Lois spoke eloquently about the experience and the immediate experience, past experience of neighborhoods. These are family neighborhoods. I can tell you from the kids I grew up with. This is where you can have a dog, you can have parties in the backyard for the neighborhood kids, you can walk places, you can ride your bike, and yeah, the bike trail does go up 7th Street right through the center of this. So it's a very bikeable neighborhood. Every high schooler I know who lived there, we biked everywhere, over to the IU pool and everywhere. So it's not really, you can't really have a lot of car traffic on the street, which goes back to the thing that was mentioned about it's not a recognizable area, that people don't recognize this area because they don't drive through it. It's not a thoroughfare, it's a neighborhood. Okay, so not a lot of people drive through the neighborhoods. The people who live there do. It's a private place for families. And as we move ahead with Monroe County's stable or declining population and the demographic cliff of 2025, which is coming up and going to affect every college town, you need to think about what we're creating for the future by preserving the past. Not to be overlooked is the fact that the whole area is anchored by the Millen House, which was one of the early Presbyterian homes. The other two are National Historic Landmarks, the same as it, and linked to the Underground Railroad. So the whole area is what the farm was, what the Millen farm was. And it did develop over time, as has been related by many of you. And so, it's part of a natural progression of homes and families creating Bloomington. Many of the bricks that built the downtown buildings were from the Millen farm. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Nancy Castor. My husband and I are homeowners in Green Acres. And my concern today is, first of all, we knew nothing about any of this till we got the letter. And then I did my homework today. And the one thing I will note, and I read through all the things, I looked at the people who signed the petition, and I don't know if this is weird or not, but there was, I think, 9 names listed at the same address that were owners. So I don't know how yes, on Edwards Road. So I don't know how you translate that. I saw many that were 2 owners on there.
That was one household, and I didn't know that I wasn't supposed to do that at that point.
Oh, well, listed, beside all of them. So I just didn't know how you came up with the number.
So the tally of, I'm sorry, do you mind if I answer?
Yes.
So the tally of total signatures, you notice that the tallies that were given for number of owners and number of renters didn't quite add up. That's because amongst the owners, those represented some households that had multiple people sign.
9. Okay, so anyway, my biggest concern is communication. We weren't, my husband and I didn't know about any of these previous meetings. And if you're gonna really look at what the people and the homeowners, and we've had that home there, 40 years? We just like to be included in that and not just have a few people decide for us. Thank you.
There was a notice put on every door.
I would like to hear some of the other people. Thank you.
Sir?
Nick Waybright, I just decided to come down to kind of listen more than speak, but I rent to about 750 students, and we've purchased multiple properties, mostly close to campus. And my biggest complaint is that I didn't hear anything. I got a phone call from a buddy that's like, hey, do you know what's going on? About a week ago. So I knew nothing, or I would have been more involved in the discussions. And Lois, I appreciate your comments and what you want to see happen, to remain, I guess, without change in the neighborhood. But I understand we're here tonight because of 5 lots on Jefferson. I guess one's on 7th Street. And I own several properties right around this area. Frankly, I don't really want the competition, so I really don't love the idea of a bunch of apartments. But I don't believe that it's fair when zoning has been put in place in, I think it's 2018, I can't remember the date, but there's zoning has been put in place. These properties have, by right, the ability to be developed with 3 stories of apartments. And I think it's wrong. All of a sudden, the Historic Preservation Committee is looking at this because you and others that have lived there, which I can appreciate, don't want to see the development. I don't see this as about historic preservation. I see this about development being stopped. You're trying to stop development. We can argue that, but I don't really like that idea. I'd like to know how many times 125 acres in one foul swoop has been designated at one time. I mean, how many times does that happen? That seems insane to me. But then the biggest thing is one of you, I think, I don't know the percentage, said 75 or 80% of these properties are owned by landlords. And hopefully I don't get a bunch of tomatoes thrown at me, and I don't think we're all bad guys. I mean, I try really hard to do a good job for our IU student residents, and I try to keep the properties. If you look at some of the properties I've purchased, there's one on the corner of Union and 5th that was an absolute dump. I mean, it was absolutely awful. And now they call it the Michigan house because it's got blue siding and a yellow door. But I try to clean them up. That's what I like to do. But I just think it's wrong. It scares me to death that I feel like my rights are taken away as an owner when these designations are placed on properties. And I don't think it's fair to, I don't even know who this person is that made these, the petition that's asking for the development, but I don't think it's fair to them. And I think that if you ask, it sounds like I just learned that 9 votes are at 1 address.
Yes.
So I think we said there's 29 interested in this, and it sounds like 9 of them are at one house. If you really ask every single owner, I think your percentages are going to be quite low. Just my opinion.
I do want to make it clear that this was published in the paper 3 times.
Understand.
Okay, so the homeowners and landlords should be paying attention to what's going on, and that's one of the ways that is announced what's going on in neighborhoods.
Both my property managers, one runs 1,500, one runs at least 200 homes, had no idea. So I mean, that's our fault, I guess, for not reading the paper every day, but we had no idea. I mean, I had no idea. So nobody mailed anything to my address on my tax record at my office to let me know.
Well, actually, it should have gotten notified.
For the letter that
Okay, all right, thank you, appreciate it.
But anyways, I would have liked to have been more involved, I just didn't know.
You have an opportunity.
Thank you.
Steve?
Yes, I'm Steve Wyatt from Bloomington Restorations. I just want to add a couple things. There was talk about the survey that our group worked on in 2018. We turned it into the city. And at that point, we were looking at 6,000 properties across the city. We did not go through systematic, I mean, we looked at every property, but we weren't trying to settle exactly what was going on with each house. We tried to get things on the city's radar within the neighborhoods that weren't in districts already, so that people knew there were things that you should watch out for. I think if we went back through, and this has happened when the city's considered other neighborhoods for designation, they've had a new survey done just of the neighborhood. And that's when you really do a fine look at every property and decide what's in and what's out as far as contributing and non-contributing. I think in the case of Green Acres, I looked at one block this summer, and I think maybe 4 of the 8 were contributing in the survey. But when I looked at that block, if I had to do a neighborhood survey, I would have said probably 7 out of the 8, if not 8 of the 8, would be contributing. So I think if you're looking at contributing versus non-contributing or not surveyed, that's deceptive because there hasn't been a neighborhood survey done of Green Acres. The other thing I want to mention is that I think with the history of conservation districts in this town, there's examples like McDowell where what you end up with when it becomes a historic district is a conservation district in effect, because the restrictions are so minimal that it doesn't have the kinds of restrictions that people are used to with historic districts. It's up to the neighborhood to draw their own guidelines. That's it.
Thanks. No comment?
Pass at the moment.
Okay. Dylan?
My name is Kalen Evans with Bloom Design Build. I'm representing 3 owners in the Green Acres neighborhood that own a total of 4 properties. The Saltbox Group LLC owns at 2512 East 7th Street as well as 138 North Overhill Drive. Joe Kim Construction that owns at 117 South Clark Street, and Kenneth D. Titus that owns at 416 North Jefferson Street. And a lot of concerns, various concerns from those different owners, kind of all over the place, and it's hard to synthesize that in just a few minutes. But what I was present on the Zoom call for the last Thursday's meeting, and just find the most trouble with this meeting being presented as an end of the process. That this is a meeting to take a vote, yes or no. This is the last stop on Green Acres' journey to potentially being a conservation district. It's the start, and you know there's been a lot of talk about buy-in. Do we know what the buy-in is? The room's full of people. We're starting to hear some voices about what's going on. So this is the beginning, not the end of the road to say we need a vote tonight to determine what's going to happen. There's a lot of discussion about the map itself. The borders are very convenient as they're drawn now. That portion of town that has the wall of the bypass, and then Union Street and 3rd Street are very convenient to put the boundaries on, but that's the first draft. Let's start to look closer at what's actually in this neighborhood. I spent, Noah, thanks for all your help. I've beat Noah up with emails today, multiple questions. He's been very, very good to work with on providing information. There are, I think the precise count is 467 parcels within the neighborhood by that Excel spreadsheet that you gave me. We're at around 200 or so properties that have been surveyed. Let's do a more comprehensive survey. What is actually in this neighborhood? And so then I sent along a Google Drive with 280 some photos of houses that I photographed yesterday, spending 3 or 4 hours walking the neighborhood. My legs are sore. My wife helped me, so she's been roped into this. But that's where this starts. Look at the architecture. I as quickly as I could try to put that together to share, but I think this is the beginning, not the end, and want to see this body give a deliberate and comprehensive review of this neighborhood.
Right, so I did want to make sure that everybody realizes that we do not decide at this meeting that you will become a conservation district. All that's going to happen with the vote, it will be sent to the city council to make the final decision if they want to make that a conservation district or not. So I want to make sure everybody's clear that we're not doing that. We're forwarding it on to city council for them to make their decision, okay?
And one more point on the survey, if I have.
Yeah.
Do I have a moment to explain on the survey? So the Title 8 of the code, as well as the HPC's rules and procedures, do specifically say that the HPC shall first prepare a map describing the district, and that the commission shall classify and designate all buildings and structures within the proposed district. And so I do want to add just procedurally, based on the city's code, Title 8, as well as the HPC's rules and procedures, that we do still not have a classification of all 467 parcels in the proposed district. That work needs to be done.
Thank you so very much. Ma'am, please.
I'm Juliet Fry. I've lived in Green Acres since 1977. I was a graduate student, and I had an old graduate student who got a job with the university, and my son and I moved in there. And I was lucky to be able to buy a house there. And when I first moved in, there was a little white pine in the front yard that my son used to jump over, is now almost 80 feet high. The whole neighborhood has become greener, but other than that, it hasn't changed very much. There are very few new houses. It's a confined, constrained neighborhood of people who want to live in that kind of area. And for example, although it's true, there are more rental people renting now than there were, the reason is primarily because houses that were owned by people, those people died or they moved away and they sold their house to, in the case of my next door neighbor, sold their house to a couple who lived in Kokomo whose children were coming to IU as students. And so that kind of continued in that the same house continued to be a house where students lived. And the kind of students that live there are the kind of students that want to live in a home-like neighborhood. They want to have a dog or a cat. They want to take their bike and ride to school. And the kids who were my neighbors for quite a while, we had this totally unspoken agreement that one week they would mow the whole side of the lawn between our houses, and the next week I would mow the whole of it. So these are the kind of people that live there. It's the kind of neighborhood that represents what Bloomington kind of is, as a home-like kind of very neighborly kind of place to live. Another thing I found out from the Hoosier Character program being started at the Monroe County Library is that if you go and put your name in, not your name, but your address into a site on the library's website, and you put your address in, and it brings up a map from 1850 and tells you who owned the property that you lived in there. And lo and behold, the person who owned my property that I've been living on was a man named William Millen. He was a big part of the Underground Railroad. And when I found that out, I felt as though I'd been living on hallowed ground. This is a neighborhood. It's a neighborhood. And to change it, it has a certain character to it. It's part of the character of Bloomington as I see it from my many years here. In conclusion, I'll read a short paragraph that my neighbor across the street asked me. She can't be here, but she wanted me to read this. I've lived in Green Acres for 31 years. It is a safe, friendly neighborhood with a happy mix of owners, student renters, and dogs being walked. To build a high-rise apartment complex in this neighborhood is to threaten and probably destroy its character. Please don't allow this to happen. Her name is Diane Dormant. She lives in North Hillsdale. Anyway, thank you very much for allowing those of us who live there, whether we rent or own, or whether we live there a short or long time, we really like that neighborhood in its special character.
Thank you very much. You next?
Okay, Peter Dorfman. My wife and I were involved in the Near West Side Conservation District application in 2019. And we offered the Green Acres group what advice we could. I'm hugely impressed with the Green Acres application, especially given the time pressure it was constructed under. And I hope you'll send it to the City Council with a strongly worded approval. As you've heard, critics will say that there is nothing remarkable or noteworthy about this little collection of mid-century modern houses. We heard the same stuff about gabled L cottages that we sought to protect in the Near West Side. Excuse me. What people are missing is that we weren't just trying to preserve individual structures. We wanted to protect an intact, architecturally consistent neighborhood fabric, one that was recognized nationally I apologize, and was clearly endangered by development pressures. The motivation is the same in Green Acres. Mid-century modern houses represent an identifiable architectural movement that has aged into eligibility for protection under state law. They may not look like much to some of the people here, but they actually may be the last generation of homes that were truly built to be permanent. It's reasonable to suggest that they'll still be here if they're maintained for at least another century. The new multifamily structures that would replace them if this application is swept aside would not be here in 100 years. Typical multifamily construction today is built with methods and materials that give it a usable life of 30 to 50 years. That, to borrow a popular phrase among Bloomington's younger ideologues, is not sustainable stewardship of our built environment. But again, it's historical fabric that this application seeks to protect. When we made that argument in the near West Side, we had what some people might consider an unfair advantage. The West Side was, not so many decades ago, the only place in Bloomington where a black family could get a mortgage. Being just up the street from the Showers Furniture Factory, where many black men worked, the near West Side was tightly intertwined with the city's black history. That made a compelling story. Our application sailed through the HPC, and City Council approved it unanimously. Green Acres doesn't have that edge, but Green Acres does have a compelling historical context. The application before you documents how this neighborhood is tightly intertwined with Bloomington's intellectual and artistic history, and the history of Bloomington's complicated relationship with IU. The application names an array of important figures who lived and worked and created in Green Acres. A number of them happen to be women, some of whom made important cracks in the university's infamous glass ceiling. So Green Acres also is wrapped up in Bloomington's women's history.
Thank you, Peter.
That context deserves the same respect that we got in 2019.
Thank you, Peter. Really appreciate that.
I can't stand, I'll try to talk so everyone can hear me. I'm Carol McGarry. I'm Juliet's backyard neighbor. And I came to Bloomington to go to college in 1966 and married into the McGarry family, who had built the two industry houses on Edwards Row. We had university professors, we had George Earl Huntington, chief of police on our street, and children galore in the whole neighborhood. I now live on 7th Street. I love the neighborhood. At first, I was a little brokenhearted to see it become less of a family neighborhood and more of a rental neighborhood. But I like the students. I'm surrounded by them. I make a point when new students move in to go meet them, meet their parents, and relations are fantastic. The students understand where they're living. They understand it's a neighborhood. I am curious to know about the responses of rental occupied owners to this proposal, because I can see their eyes kind of glisten. Well, I have a house that I'm limited to 5 people by city code, and now I can tear that down. I can build a 3-story house, have that many more students, and that much more income. That is not a neighborhood. And I would miss our neighborhood hugely. That's all.
Thank you. Gentleman in the hat.
Yeah. I'm Richard Martin. I'm a former member of the Plan Commission here. I'm currently president of the Monroe County Redevelopment Commission. I've gotten to be involved in a lot of the talk about affordable housing. also a property owner and landlord in this area. A couple of observations I think that you kind of glossed over a little bit. There's not one neighborhood here, there are two. There's an older one, which was Hillsdale, I believe it's called, and there's a newer one. And they are physically very different. One has straight streets, one has the curved streets and cul-de-sacs that people have talked about. The value of the housing stock in those two neighborhoods is quite different. If you take away the value of the land that the lots sit on, you'll find that the value of the homes in the older part, the Hillsdale part, are generally less than the value of the homes in the newer part. Part of that's the age of the homes. Part of it is that the older parts of that area sit on 25-foot wide lots, almost all of which have been aggregated together in some fashion that make a buildable space. There are a couple of those lots which actually have a structure on them independent, but most of the lots there are 25 feet that have been aggregated into 50, 75, or 100 feet to build a home. The other side is quite different in terms of its layout and geometry. So I think there are two neighborhoods here, not one. And you need to think about them as two different kinds of neighborhoods, by the way, because they function a little bit differently as well because of that physical difference. The other one I wanted to touch upon, and somebody said something about this, was that by preserving some of these neighborhoods, you can address some of the affordability issues. And I categorically will tell you that that is not historically true.
It's not.
Affordability has nothing to do with those kinds of issues.
No.
The things that drive affordability are much different. And in a situation where you have many properties that are rented out rather than owner occupied, affordability takes on a whole different meaning. Because for many of us, we depend upon that income. It's fixed income for us. We've made the investment. We are expecting that income to be there. We expect at some point in the future that when the medical bills get too high, we have to turn the property over to somebody else because we need the cash to pay for bills. That's the reality of the ownership of these properties. There are a few owners who own a lot of property, and they've made this their business to manage these properties. So I think there are two different issues here that you're trying to meld into one solution, and that will cause more difficulty down the line. I think I encourage you to think about it a little bit differently. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, appreciate it. You, sir?
Thank you. My name is Ted Najum. I don't live in Green Acres, but I did when I was in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, when I was 8, 9, and 10 years old. I want to associate myself with the comments in the application that are attributed to George Huntington. For the children of Green Acres, the entire neighborhood was our playground. It was a place where residents did not lock their doors, where children roamed freely from yard to yard and from home to home, and where parents not only looked out for their own children, but for their neighbors' children as well. I had suggested and was pleased to learn that the application includes and mentions Charlotte Zitlow and Dr. Frank Chrismalis. Tonight I'd like to quickly add 4 more names to the list of notable persons who have lived and have been part of the history of Green Acres. First person is Linda Rumpel. Linda lived at 327 North Roosevelt with her parents, Ray and Grace, and her brother, Robert. Our backyard touched their backyard. I first met Linda when she was 5 and I was 8. Linda went on to earn degrees from IU, a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and a law degree. And she then served 3 Bloomington mayors in the legal department. First appointed by Frank McCluskey to be an assistant city attorney, later as city attorney. Then Tommy Allison appointed Linda to become corporation counsel. She was the first-rate, enthusiastic, and tenacious advocate for the city's legal interests. She built an excellent staff of serious lawyers, and she represented the city as legal counsel for 23 years. She represented the city in Bloomington Board of Zoning Appeals versus Delta Treatment Centers of Indiana, a case she won for the BZA before the Indiana Court of Appeals. She represented the city as lead counsel in Dvorak versus City of Bloomington, a case she won before the Indiana Supreme Court. In 2000, the city dedicated a plat which included a street named for Linda called Runkle Way, located off of Gates Drive behind the Whitehall Crossing Shopping Center. Linda is a Bloomington native, a baby boomer who began her life in the Green Acres neighborhood and played a significant role in the legal history of Bloomington. The next person, quickly, Walter W. Gray Jr., was a Navy veteran of World War II, a graduate of Wabash and IU, a standout in football and baseball, taught at University School for 20 years, and was the athletic director. He and his wife, Helen, raised 4 sons at 111 North Jefferson Street in Green Acres. Walt coached football and golf for University High School, and he coached our undefeated team, 10-0 undefeated season in 1964, where we beat 10 teams and shut out 7 of those teams, which scored no points against us. The same academic year, he coached the UHS golf team to a state championship, the only state championship University High School ever earned. Walt was a World War II hero. He earned a presidential citation for gallantry during an epic sea battle with a German submarine in the mid-Atlantic.
Ted, we're at our 3-minute mark.
Pardon me?
We're at our 3-minute mark.
Okay, I just want to just give the names of the other 2 people.
Please do.
Okay. The next person is Bob Hamill, who was sports editor and columnist for the Herald Times for 30 years, whom everybody knows. And the other person has been mentioned, George Earl Huntington Jr., who was a law enforcement officer for 40 years, Bloomington Police Chief, and Police Chief for the Indiana University Police Department.
Thank you, Dad.
Thank you, Dad.
Yeah, I'm Emerson.
Can you step in, please?
My name's Emerson Wells. I've lived in Bloomington for 10 days in the Green Acres neighborhood. So I'm pretty new, but I'm here to listen and learn. I'm a rising graduate student, and so I may be one of the few people in the room that is a renter. And though I can't speak to whether or not an experience that warrants if this could be a conservation district or not, I can speak to why I was interested in living in the Green Acres neighborhood. And some other people have mentioned is the fact that it does feel like a neighborhood. In the time that I've been here, which has been very short, I've been able to feed myself with the generosity of gardens from someone down the road. I was invited salsa dancing with my neighbor. I had a community dinner, and it's just been very lovely. I understand urbanization and sustainable living in the sense of needing to make sure all are housed, and to that sense also comes an affordability piece. I can speak to my personal experience when at the time that I was looking to move to Bloomington and looking for housing, I could afford Green Acres and I could not afford other areas. For me personally, I found a lot of value in a neighborhood that I knew would bring people, kindness, outdoor space that you can't necessarily get in other spaces at a higher price tag for me personally. So thank you for everyone's thoughts.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay. My name is Kristen Woodworth, and my family owns a property at 220 South Jefferson, and I'm also against the property, against this thing. I didn't know about it till the letter also, and I'm concerned about the number of people that were questioned, because I am considered an owner-occupant in my family because my children are on the deed. We bought the house for my kids to live there while they're in school, and then they rent it out. And I feel like we don't have glistening eyeballs. We do charge a very reasonable price for our tenants, and that's why we like it, because it is a house, it's nice. But I do think making it a historic area is a misuse of the category of a conservation or historical for the personal use of people not having development, and I don't think that's what a historical category should be used for. And I think maybe a representation of only the owner occupants was not fair. In the sense I didn't even get one, and I am an owner occupant, my family is, so I just think the numbers are not there, and it needs to definitely be opened up to more people.
Great, thank you very much.
Excuse me. My name is Jim Bohr. I'm from Clendening, Johnson & Bohr, and I'm here representing 3 owners. Becky Harris-Mollis, who is an owner-occupant and who also owns 17 other properties. John Lukens of CJ Satellite, who owns 14 properties in the area. And 3rd Street NJ Indy LLC, who owns 1 property which is at the very eastern fringe of the Green Acres district. I think it's important to remember why you're here. You're here because some properties were going to be destroyed. That's what caused you to have this meeting, not because you decided that you were going to have a historic district, but because you were trying to prevent something. You were trying to prevent properties from being destroyed. I think it's important to remember at the last meeting that you had, your last regular meeting, you said you weren't a planning board, you were a historic board, and in fact, as a result of trying to stop something, you're being asked to be a planning board. You're trying to be used as a planning board, not a historic board. And you're trying to be used by that neighborhood to stop something. And it's going to affect 467 properties if you do that. And I think it's important that you not be allowed to be used that way. My clients feel that they're adequately protected by the existing zones. They don't want to be used that way. They think that the maps should be redrawn. The maps should be drawn to only take into account the property owners who want to be used, who want to be designated, to exclude all the properties that don't want to be designated. And if it can't be done that way, then just turn this down. Thank you very much.
The commission did not actively go to pursue turn Green Acres into a conservation district. It was the homeowners that came to us that asked us to do something. I really don't care about those 5 houses, if it gets torn down or not. But the people who are in that community, in that neighborhood, want to see that property stay as it is. I just want to make that clear. All right. Gentleman in the back, please.
I'm Randy Rogers. I'm an owner, and we are the landlord in that with one home off of 5th Street. We too did not know anything about this until we received the letter. Yes, we should have been reading the paper, but we weren't aware that anything was happening like this. I speak against moving forward with this, and it strikes me as I've been listening to the conversation this evening, several residents have talked about living there since 1970, 1977. Change has been happening for many years. And I have heard repeatedly from those same individuals that this is still a wonderful neighborhood, that the students choose to live there. And we even heard from one that said this is a wonderful neighborhood that they chose to live in. So I do agree with Jim's comments here that I think we're utilizing something on a grand scale to prevent something very small happening. I would also like to talk about one particular point that was said about some of the homes having historic value. Yes, some of them do. Some, much like the one that we own, was a Sears and Roebuck catalog house. I'm surprised it's still standing with all that has happened over the years. And we've done a particularly good job of, I think, of going in and making sure that the house itself retains its look, but if you were to go into the inside of the house, it would not look like it did when it was built at the time that it was there. And so that is the change that continues to happen in this community. But I think, again, I'll close with the respect of the neighborhood and the respect of the efforts that are being done. It apparently has worked for the last 50+ years. Let's not come in and make a blanket statement to protect something that may be small, that existing planning codes and development restrictions already are in place to prevent. Thank you.
All right, who's next over here? Ma'am?
No, I'm
Okay.
I talked enough.
I'll just quickly say I'm a homeowner and a recent homeowner in the neighborhood. I moved there because I want to live in a small neighborhood. I live with Ann and Emerson in a kind of community village. We have a big garden and we share with the neighborhood. So that's the kind of environment that we want to live in, and that's why I'm here. Alicia.
I'm Elizabeth Cox Ash. I'm from McDowell Gardens. And our neighborhood is very similar to Green Acres. We have like 430 houses compared to your 440 according to the report. We had a significant outstanding property just like you have the Millen. We had working class houses, very similar. Yes, there was opposition. One of the things that we did, and we were 60% rental versus 40% owner occupied. When we started in 2000, that's what it was. In 2014, when we were elevated to full historic, those numbers flipped. We were then 60% owner occupied and 40% rental. Now, why? Values went up in the property, so if you fixed up a property, you got more for it if you sold it. It was less important for landlords to own within the neighborhood. A lot of them sold. A lot of them they had grandma's house and, you know, they didn't want to keep grandma's house. They wanted to convert it to cash. So that's what happened with our neighborhood. But Green Acres, this same sort of thing could happen. And by the way, Lois, if you need help, I'm available. I can't walk your neighborhood anymore. I'm 69. I'm too old to do that anymore. But I can help you in other ways, and I'd be glad to. Also, one of the things that McDowell did that others necessarily, I don't know, we got investors in with our design guidelines and with our rules, writing our rules before it went up to a vote. So I hope you gentlemen will be involved with writing the guidelines, because the important thing is to try to get a consensus. And that's what McDowell did. What are you holding up?
Oh, I was just letting people know when they have 1 minute left and when they have 30 seconds left.
Oh.
I didn't mean to interrupt.
So at any rate, Jack was part of our design guidelines for many years, so he knows all about this. But I urge you to go ahead and vote on them and allow this to happen and let them proceed. This can be a very positive thing for the neighborhood and for Bloomington. There are other places for investors to build 5-story high rentals.
I'm afraid that is.
That's it.
Thank you. All right. Pam?
Hi, I'm Joanne Campbell. I am a longtime resident of Green Acres. My neighbors, George Huntington, Mary Sass, there is a rental right next to me, Grant Properties, who just do a marvelous job of keeping the property nice. They've been very cooperative. I have had wonderful both rentals and longtime friends that lived across from me, the Bushies, the Stuckies. I know that are longtime residents. Some have unfortunately passed away. But I have loved Green Acres because I worked for IU for almost 30 years, bike to work for the most part. It's just a unique community, and my home is a nice limestone, very well built, the beams are incredible on it. But, you know, I do live by the railroad tracks. That's my only thing. When it blows its horn, it wakes me up about 3 a.m. sometimes. So, but there is a unique thing about our community where we go to community dinners together. We invite the new people in our community to gather. And I think we would lose so much of that with a high-rise apartment, towering over our homes. I think it's not going to be a thing where we're wanting to tell people what color to paint their house and stuff. I think it is a thing of just keeping our neighborhood. And I thank you so much.
Thank you very much. we'll come back.
I just want to get a point of clarification. I've heard a
All
couple
right.
times about a high rise.
Yes.
And it sounds like that's not even allowed
Thank
for
you.
code.
That's correct.
Okay, yeah, I just want to
Well,
clear that up.
If you're a single one, anything over that can be a little much.
Go ahead, sir.
Hello, my name is Jeremy Urhosky Schneider. I was raised in the Green Acres neighborhood, with my father and my grandmother. I'm here representing my father, who still lives on 2552 Eastgate Lane. We have several concerns about the Green Acres becoming a conservation district. Our main concern being a conservation district exaggerating Bloomington's housing crisis. Currently, Bloomington, like many cities in the United States, has a housing crisis. Homes and apartments available to the poor and the working class are dramatically low. The issue has impacted my brothers and I in profound ways. Will this conservation district make it difficult to create ADUs, apartment buildings, or dense mixed-use development? If a conservation district affects any of this, then it is exaggerating the housing crisis. We do not believe neighborhood aesthetics and property values should be prioritized over the impoverished and the working class access to affordable homes. I hope you all and the council in the future take this concern very seriously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm John Woodhouse. I won't stand up because of health conditions. But what gets me about this whole thing is, when I went to Kmart, they had big briefings, talk about, oh, we're gonna build it, we're gonna build this, build this. Have I heard anything, anybody mention anything about building anything? The second thing is, 80% of rentals. What is the association did to get more people to come in, buy houses, and not rent them, but actually live there? I mean, 80%. I mean, if it was 40%, I mean, I like a lot of renters and stuff, but 80%, isn't that a little too much? I mean, what is the association do about it? I know, all I know about the association is two things I've had. One of my neighbors, she had people making so much noise in the backyard she couldn't even sleep. Did the association stop that? That's number one. Number two, we got water coming in off the railroad track, and everybody went to the railroad, they went to Bloomington. Did they get the water stopped or everything? No, the water still comes. So what does the association do about that? That's the only thing I want to say.
Thank you, sir.
All right, hi, my name is Dave Roberts. I was a resident of the Green Acres neighborhood when I was a student, just a few years ago. And my wife and I recently moved back to Bloomington for all of these reasons, right? Our kids can now run around our neighborhood. In fact, our neighborhood is kind of their backyard. We eat off of our neighbors' gardens. You know, I can hear the train as well. You know, all of these things are because of Bloomington, not specific to Green Acres. So I think that's an interesting thing that I keep hearing over and over, but that's not just Green Acres, that's all over Bloomington, and that's why we came back here. I have 5 rental properties in this area because I lived there when I was in college, and I really, really enjoyed it. And we do definitely want to keep that vibe there. But I do hear all the stuff about high-rises. Who's building a high-rise? There's not a high-rise. It does seem that this has been a bit of a knee-jerk reaction to one particular area. Do we even know what's going to be built on Jefferson?
No.
So it may not, it's likely not a high-rise given the code, right? So I do think that the code's there for a reason. It's doing its job, and I don't think a blanket, any sort of blanket changes is going to achieve what we're looking for here. And I do want to thank you ladies for canvassing. I understand that had to have been a lot of work, but like some of these other folks here, I didn't know anything about it until Friday. So, you know, I'm happy to help go find out what a more representative yes, yay or nays is in this situation, but I just don't think we have that information. We didn't even know how many houses there were in this area until somebody stood up and told us. So I think that's a very basic place where we got to start. What are we talking about here? So if we're talking about doing a conservation, then we shouldn't be worried about the timing of this specific development project. We should be bound by that timing. That's all.
Thank you.
Chris Sturbaum. You know, every
preservation action always has a threat, because you don't know what you've got till it's gone, and when it's threatened, you go, what is this? What is this we care about? And you all on the commission, your decision is not, what does the most of the neighborhood think it's historic or not? I mean, you are the experts to decide, is this a historic district? And the unique thing about this is the original Covenanter house that owned the whole neighborhood, where the farm was developed, everything got developed. You know, the pre-World War II housing that started to happen, that was another growth ring in the city of Bloomington. Then the Great War. The Depression happened, nothing was built. The Great War was 80 years ago, World War II. And these people came back from fighting fascism, and they wanted a happy place. They had a GI Bill to go to school. They had great loans to get their houses. And these housing shortage, we needed to build these small, great little places. A backyard, a green little backyard, a little house. It was actually the American dream. This is what was built, and that's why people are feeling the built environment. They came back and built the American dream. The baby boom actually started there. You know, those are the little neighborhoods that the baby boom started in originally. And this is largely intact. And rental, not rental, the renters love them because these are great little houses. The owners love them. They're naturally affordable. You know, you tear down affordable houses and then say you're going to help by building density. It doesn't, that is what doesn't work. So what you need to ask yourselves on the commission is this a historic district? Does it meet the criterion? Is it important enough to save? Should we make that statement? Because you are the experts. You know, the council can decide whether they want to play games with this or not protect this neighborhood, but you're supposed to give them the advice that they need from experts. So think about it, make your decision based on your responsibility on the commission.
Thanks. I see we had another gentleman come in. Do you have a comment?
Also, anything on Zoom?
And the hallway.
I'm getting there from you. Anybody in the hallway?
Anybody in the hall?
Nobody else? Okay. We'll move over to Zoom now. All right.
Great.
Please raise your hand for me.
Unmute as you. I'll
All
ask
right.
someone to unmute.
Mr. Minter?
Sure.
There we go. Thank you, sir.
Hello, hi.
Hi.
Yeah,
Hi there. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello, everybody. Yes, there is so much to be said that can be said, and I've been wanting to say many, many things. I do think that the Green Acres neighborhood runs the risk of becoming a victim of itself, in the sense that its proximity, you know, to IU is its downfall and its strength at the same time. It's kind of, that's what makes it historically interesting, but that's what makes it now a predominantly rental neighborhood. Now, I've heard people throw figures around here, 80%, 70%. I was thinking it was lower. I'm a homeowner in Green Acres. It was pretty much all I could afford. I think it's a shame. There is an irony in that, and that's just a comment. I think we do need more information. The flyers that we distributed for you know, the public meetings, they only went to homeowners that were residing in their properties at the time, people like me, so you missed a lot of folks. So I would absolutely agree that you need more information from homeowners in the neighborhood. I would also say, as somebody else had said, the survey that was carried out that neglected to include, I don't know, 80 or 90 properties, they could well be contributing properties. I think that is, you know, the information is not complete without that being, you know, complete. The other thing I would say, and my cats are chiming in here, having fun, is that, you know, if you drive around Green Acres and you look at Green Acres and you think, oh, this is nothing special. right? I mean, there isn't much architectural virtuosity. There aren't individual examples of outstanding, I don't know, buildings or whatever. But taken as a whole, there is a very interesting sort of story that's told. You go down 5th Street and it's like time, you know, time. In a previous meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission, somebody talked about what I think they termed the progressive dismantling of neighborhoods, and I think that's what worries me about Green Acres.
Okay. We have 30
but,
seconds
you know,
left. We have 30 seconds left.
30 seconds, my gosh,
Yes.
it goes fast, doesn't it? Yeah, all I was going to say, the progressive dismantling of the neighborhood is what I think worries me and may worry other homeowners. You know, you allow one thing, one development, and then there come others.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next person with hand up is Mary. I can't.
Rovette.
Okay, yes.
Rovette.
Thank you.
Thanks. My name is Mary Rovette, and I've lived in Green Acres for 18 years. I oppose the designation of the neighborhood as a conservation district. Green Acres has always appeared mixed to me in terms of the age, character, and condition of its housing. In my block of the street where I live, the houses were built over a 70-year span. On the same block, one street over, the houses were built within the post-war period that the entire neighborhood supposedly exemplifies. However, one street over in the opposite direction, the residences are much newer, and about half were built within the last 30 years, and this includes several duplexes. This is a small sample, but it suggests that the neighborhood as a whole is indeed too varied to warrant any historical designation. In addition, as others have noted, current zoning already protects Green Acres from large-scale development. The potential presence on North Jefferson of a 3-story apartment building seems quite in keeping with the location of the site on the edge of the neighborhood and across the street from a 14-story dorm. Denser housing is needed and makes sense there. Most of the neighborhood is zoned R3, which is specifically intended to protect the neighborhood by making owner-occupied and affordable housing more viable. Becoming a conservation district could actually threaten that goal rather than protecting the neighborhood's character. I doubt that we could avoid becoming a historic district or avoid the associated expense and administrative burden for property owners, which seems likely to reduce the affordability of housing here. I bought my house in Green Acres because it hit a sweet spot of walkability and affordability, both characteristics that contribute to inclusivity. Housing in the neighborhood is less affordable now than it was then. I'd like to see it become more affordable and thus more inclusive, not less. When I walk through my neighborhood, I see a place that's been built up and maintained over many decades and is still changing to meet current needs. That's the kind of place where I want to live. I don't want to live in a time capsule. Zoning should not be about nostalgia. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lucy?
Lucy?
I think I'm unmuted. Hi, my name's Lucy Shake. I grew up in Green Acres and have witnessed firsthand its many transitions. I went door to door as a child, and some of those doors were answered by students, and some of those doors were answered by homeowners and people who had been there for years and years. Every neighborhood tells a story, and the story that Green Acres tells is the story of Bloomington's many established, university-adjacent, modest neighborhoods being ravaged by corporate investment, denying those families and individuals of modest means the opportunity to own or rent those modest properties. With this application, the neighborhood is attempting to reassert themselves as a core part of that story. There are very powerful entities that have investment in this neighborhood. The top 6 investors in the neighborhood own 75 properties. We're only looking at 90 homeowners who live in the neighborhood, and the top 6 investors own 75 properties. What I hear when I hear about these demolition proposals is not about the people that own 1 or 2 or 4 or 5 properties and rent those out to their kids or, you know, for low-income people who have modest means. I hear people who are playing Monopoly with Green Acres neighborhood, and that's what's happening. This group of properties was traded to another owner and they had money to invest and to knock them down and to do what they wanted to. That is not what Green Acres really wanted. This is not what Green Acres has been about for the whole time that I've known about it and lived there. From what I am hearing, some 30 people gathered 3 times. They canvassed the neighborhood. They worked together to try to learn about this process. And they're proposing a conservation district. A conservation district is a historic district, but it only has review over 3 things: demolition of a primary structure, moving of a primary structure in or out of the district, or new construction of a primary structure. It has no effect on regulating the interior of a structure. I've heard that expressed tonight. Don't worry about it. That's not happening. This conservation district would have design guidelines for structures that apply to any of those 3 criteria.
30 seconds.
Thank you. I don't think this is going to affect anybody but those large, multi-property folks who want to play with this neighborhood's future. Everybody else is going to be fine. I live in a neighborhood that has a district just like this, and it is fine. We have approved all of
Thank you,
the
Lucy.
things that have come through, have gone through just fine. So please keep going. Please respect the neighbor's experience and let them have a part of their neighborhood
Thank you.
again.
Thank you, Lucy. Appreciate that. Okay. We had a Larry Hassfurther.
Hassfurther.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. So my name's Larry Hassfurther. I'm a small investor. I own 1 unit or 1 house on 7th Street. I can respect the position of people who want to preserve. I can also appreciate the history, which I think Noah did a great job talking about. But I could also say that you can probably, there's probably a story behind almost every neighborhood, especially old neighborhood. I am an investor. I'm not a really rich guy. I own a few properties down here. I invest in rental real estate as a way to help take care of my family. I do have concerns because, you know, I did not invest in the home that I invested in under the assumption that it would eventually become a historic district. I don't really know what that means in terms of the burden. I do think that I do echo some concern that was raised earlier. A couple things. Would such designation really help provide affordable housing, or would it hurt affordable housing? I really don't know, but I think that there's a possibility that it could make houses there more affordable. There's a lot of history of places that have become historical districts. That could very well happen. I do think as the university grows, you know, would this hamstring the ability of the university to eventually put in more density? Obviously, people here are opposed to that. I think that the current code, it does sound like the current code, a lot of the concerns that I've heard in this call are about the possibility of more high-rise buildings. And it seems like the current code protects against that. The other things that I would have concern with is it doesn't sound like there's very little consensus. I don't remember the exact numbers. I know that there's maybe
30
roughly 80
seconds.
owners. But I know that I didn't vote for it. I know other owners who didn't vote for it. I do think that there needs to be a lot more consensus. I think there needs to be a lot more discussion. And as somebody else pointed out, I think this should be the beginning, not the end of the decision-making process.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you all for listening to me, and thank you all for hosting this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, up next is Mr. On, is that right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, good evening. My name is YY An, and I really appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight. So I'd like to say that while conserving valuable history is really important, we must also acknowledge the cost, the significant costs that come with such a designation. Although I don't live in Green Acres, I pass it by every day, more or less, during my commute. And I want to emphasize that this cost will impact not just the residents of the Green Acres, but anyone who wants to live in Bloomington in affordable housing options. Housing costs have been surging across the country and especially in Bloomington in Indiana. And it really makes it increasingly difficult for like city workers to afford living in the city and so on, and that creates a lot of issues. And homelessness is also on the rise, and one of the important causes of these issues is a severe lack of housing stock. And I think we see all these similar looking big apartment complexes. I think no one likes them, and I think the very reason that we see so many of those is that the organic, gentle, and bottom-up developments are constantly blocked by the opposition like this or other sorts for the sake of like preserving neighborhood characters, which too often become a pretext for exclusion, intentional or not. And I mean, there's even a duplex proposal that is aggressively opposed around the park. And the result is that this big money coming in and build those big apartments because they just need so much more housing. So also, while there are many successful examples of preservation districts across the country, we also seen so many cases where it is abused to preserve property values and block new construction. Sometimes with bad intention, but sometimes with good intention.
30 seconds.
It also follows a long history of exclusionary practices like redlining and exclusionary zoning. So I'm concerned that this case will further suppress our housing stock, which will lead to housing price climbing up and those big apartments, more of those big apartments.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. All right. Would you please raise your hand so we know who to call on next?
On Zoom.
On Zoom, please.
We're not seeing any more.
I'm not seeing any hands being raised. Do we have more comments?
Oh, we just got one.
Mr. Kerber. You're muted, sir.
I've asked him to unmute, give him permission to unmute.
There we go, I figured it out, sorry about that.
No worries.
David, can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. David Kerber, I own a couple units, manage about 30 here in Green Acres. I'm currently walking around Green Acres right now, getting ready for all these renters. I just quickly want to echo the comments, sort of with concerns with this becoming a conservation district and sort of impeding, growth. We do need density. If you want to save neighborhoods, and I know a lot of people want to keep the students out of neighborhoods, you have to create density around the university that will actually save the neighborhoods. And I think that the zoning currently does protect that. Representing about 8 different owners, I can tell you that, again, maybe it's in the newspaper. Don't say that newspaper is dying, but none of us knew any of this until these letters came out. So certainly in talking about buy-in and wanting to see what the actual interest from, be it somebody who owns the owners who own 75 of the units, or somebody who owns one, or somebody who owns two like myself, or who owns more. I live in Bloomington. I'm in Green Acres daily. I can tell you of the 30 houses, I saw not one notice posted on a door. So I think that, again, to echo what everybody said, this should be a beginning, not an end. And you know, to follow the zoning that has been set forth. And you know, if you want to spot designate here and there, that makes sense. But to just sort of blanket 125 acres doesn't seem like the right way to go. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right. Do we have anybody else?
CJ Mentor.
I'm sorry.
CJ Mentor.
Yeah, I saw CJ. I'm looking to see if there's any other
They'll come.
residents. Okay. CJ? You have-
Hello, one observation just in response to what was just said. It was knocked down before that there were 9 people who responded from a house, you know, in the petition. But how do we manage it if we have people who are owners here in this neighborhood who happen to own 10 rental properties? How does that fall? It's just a kind of another sort of complicated element, potentially.
So you're saying if you set units, you only get one vote?
All right.
Does that make sense?
Was that a
What's
question?
that?
Was that a
I thought it was
question?
a comment.
That's what I thought it was
Just a
too.
comment.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay.
You're saying if you got 70 units, you only get one vote, right?
That's right.
Okay.
Okay, scan.
I'm Joan Middendorf. From 1994 to 1998, I lived on 123 North Jefferson Street, and I got this giant set of titles when I lived there. And I'm referring to the comment that said it only affect the 90 people that live there. In this title search that goes back, I have dated, this is like May 7th, 1957. It says that in 1946, several vacant lots in the city of Bloomington, Indiana, were acquired for the purpose of developing housing for faculty and staff members following the GI Bill. All purchasers, so a lot of people went to IU because of the GI Bill, and they didn't have enough housing for faculty. The property were acquired for the purpose of developing housing for faculty and staff members, all purchases being made from private owners. The purchase price for said property was paid out of the Emergency Faculty Housing Fund. So they had an emergency, and they needed housing for faculty back in 1946. So they were building houses for faculty. And for the last 40 years, I worked for the teaching center on campus. And a couple years ago, when we had new faculty orientation, the 4 faculty sitting at a table with me, one of them was able to rent a house in Bloomington. One of them lived in Greenwood, and 2 had to rent in Indianapolis because they could not get housing in Bloomington after the COVID. And so we have another housing emergency in Bloomington. And so we need to build more densely in Green Acres. Would be a great place to do it. I lived in a house, so what? It was a little house, but we need to not be sending students who are living way out west Third Pass, where I live in near West Side, way east in Bloomington, you know, over near 446 is where we're gonna build another big development. Why can't it be just right next to campus where people wanna live? And I wanna refer to something somebody else said, like, it was so great how near West Side got to have being a historic district. When we, now remember what's gonna happen. You'll go to a conservation district if that happens. And then what I don't like, it's a very undemocratic process, because once it becomes a conservation district, the vote has to be a majority against becoming historic. So in our district, we had 120 votes against becoming a historic district, 41 in favor. But because we didn't have a majority of votes against being historic, we still went historic. We were 3-1 against, but because of like 387 people, you know, like 9 people might be on the lead, because we needed half of 387, we didn't hit that target. So even though we were 3-1 against in the vote, only 41 people voted to be historic, and we still had to be a historic district. So it's not popular in our neighborhood, it just got jammed down our throats.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right.
Mr. Chairman,
Do we have,
may I respond to that?
please, Peter,
Okay.
3 minutes.
Yes, I was involved in the original designation of the Near West Side as a conservation district, and inevitably, under state law, after 3 years, you go through a process where you either elevate or not. And under state law, the process for preventing elevation from conservation to historic is really onerous. In order to prevent that, you have to have 50% of actual properties voting against elevation. It's an impossible goal. No conservation district in Bloomington has ever successfully resisted the elevation to historic. So it should be understood that if you go historic, conservation district, you will be eventually a historic district. You should know that from the onset. The original designation process for conservation district acknowledged this in very obvious terms. We held a whole series of meetings in which this was discussed. And it was really, I think, well documented that it was unlikely that we would be able to resist that pressure. But I wanted to talk about the, what I think is a general misconception about the notion that historic designation is something that has to be done in a neighborhood where there is a majority consensus where that takes place. It never works that way. We had 350 properties in the Near West Side that were included in the original conservation district. Under state law, we were not required to hold a vote. We were simply required to make sure that everybody was informed that this was taking place. We did hold a vote because we felt that it was important on the most practical level to convince the city council to approve it, to show that we had consensus. So we did hold a vote. We got a 30% turnout during that vote. And it was very strongly in favor of being designated in the first place, 60-40. Now, 30% turnout is not a majority. What I'd like to point out is that that same year, 2019, we held an election in Bloomington, choosing the mayor and the composition of the city council, which got an 8% turnout. So the consensus that we had for the original designation was about more than 3 times stronger than the consensus for who should be our mayor.
Can I just point out that even Lois, right, said that she doesn't want this to be a historic district, but everybody else is saying that once this happens, it will become a historic district.
Yes.
So I feel like this is all semantics right now.
Could I speak to that, please? Because I didn't speak earlier.
Yes, go ahead.
Sort of still on my 3 minutes. I'm Olivia Dorfman. I am in the Near West Side, and the sense that if it becomes a historic district, there's a sudden burden placed upon every house in the neighborhood. I don't know where that's coming from. The guidelines are not restrictive at all. If you have a house that is a contributing house, and this isn't a full historic district, and you want to take out a window on the street-facing side and replace it with a picture window, they'd probably have a problem with that. But if you're replacing it with a more efficient window, same size opening, that's not changing the look. A full historic district is just kind of keeping the look the same, but it's not restricting materials. People still have solar panels, people have decks, the stuff they put off the back of the house. They've got expansions into the backyard of larger living spaces.
ADUs?
ADUs, you know, you still have the ability to convert your house. And I think from the proposals that have had to go through the neighborhood, I don't think anybody's been turned down, have they? I mean, there have been, okay, they were turned down because?
Well, one was completely out of scale with the neighborhood and it made no sense in terms of the guidelines. Others have been turned down because they didn't follow the process. And when I say turned down, it's not that the neighborhood was able to stop these projects from happening. All we do is advise this commission as to whether we think it's appropriate for the neighborhood. The commission makes the decision, not us.
Yeah. The thing I feel about this as a homeowner is homeowners have very little input into any of the decisions that are made about their neighborhood or their city. Very little input, and this is one of the few ways homeowners have input.
I do want to make sure, this is a public hearing, people get 3 minutes to speak, but we've got to keep some order to the meeting, so let the chair manage the public comments, please.
Can I just make one comment?
And if anybody asks, I'm the attorney for the commission, so that's why I'm being bossy.
Thank you, Marty. Go ahead. Yeah, the one comment I was gonna say is, who would want a house facing the street and you couldn't have a picture window? Nobody.
Let's change your window, it's not.
I have one more.
Please.
I'm a residential real estate agent for 19 years, and I've had experience in a historical neighborhood where somebody could not put a radon mitigation system in, which was required because the pipe was venting out, it goes on the outside of the house, and it was not approved because it didn't meet the aesthetic. And someone else at one point had to get new windows, but they had to put exactly like period windows in. Instead of like spending $32,000, they had to spend like $180,000, which it made it cost prohibitive. So I feel like saying it doesn't make a difference, it is easy to say now, but when you get into this and there's rules you have to answer to people, it's not always that easy.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I mean, here.
We want to move on.
Historical.
Duncan, did you have any comments at this point? And we'll get to our other commissioners.
Are you coming back to the commission?
I think we're doing the commission, we should probably go around before we take a vote.
Yeah.
Just for the sake of everyone here, I'm an advisory member to this commission, and I don't vote on their, with the commission. So I usually try to make comments that suggest the right procedure, and in this case, I think there's been a lot of discussion about consensus, and in most of these meetings, there's a fair amount of fear about what people do and don't understand about how the process works. But the role of the commission in nominating a historic district to the city council for approval is to evaluate whether or not that historic district, whether it's a single house or 400 houses or 10,000 houses, meets the criteria set before them in federal, state, and local law. And those criteria are pretty strict. And so the criteria that have been suggested for this by our staff member, who's professionally trained, are 1A, C, and G. And those are that is the only issue before us, whether this neighborhood as presented and history as written meets those qualifications. It's not about how many people in the neighborhood want it and don't want it. It's not about whatever you believe is more expensive or not more expensive. It's about whether on the ground the built environment in this community meets these criteria or not. Anyone can bring a proposal to this commission suggesting that a property be made a historic district. And the commission is always challenged to see if those criteria are being met. They don't decide finally whether it goes into law or not. That's a political decision that's made by the city council, and remonstrance is welcome, okay? So maybe Noah wants to repeat the criteria before a proposal or a vote is made, but that's what's before this commission to decide.
Do we have any more comments from our commissioners? Jack?
I agree.
Okay.
I'm going to parrot what was just said. I'm also advisory, do not vote, but this came to us This petition came to us from the outside. It's here in front of us. It meets 3 criteria for conservation district, and I would have to recommend to our commissioners that we recommend this to council, and let it play out at council. So my recommendation is to send it on with the staff report, a positive recommendation.
Sam?
I hear what our advisory members are saying, and I don't disagree with them. But the A, C, and G, A, has significant character, interest, or value as part of the development, heritage, cultural, blah, blah, blah. And the other 2 talk about exemplifying the heritage of the community, or exemplifying the built environment in an era of history characterized by a distinctive architectural style. And on all 3 of those, I take some issue, so I am still unconvinced.
Elizabeth?
I appreciate what our advisors had to say, and thank you very much. I'll take that under consideration, too. And so it's a lot to think about. And thank all of you for coming. That's it.
Thank you. Daniel?
Liz took most of what I wanted to say, so nice thought. And Noah, thank you for all your work on this. I know it's not easy, so you've done a phenomenal job across, and keeping us informed with all the emails. Noah, I know that couldn't have been easy, so I want to thank you for all of your work on that. And I'm similar to Sam or Liz. I can kind of see both sides, so I appreciate what both the advisory commissioners have said, because that does have a lot of weight.
Bill?
So I want to thank everyone who showed up. What was interesting is I learned a lot more about the community that we're talking about. I think there was a lot of additional information that came through about notable figures who lived in the neighborhood. We have a lot of information about notable figures already, but I learned a lot more than what I had read. I also want to thank Lois and her team for putting this together, because I found the documentation that you put together to be significant, especially significant in the time you had to work with to put it all together. And so, like I said, I want to thank you for that. I want to thank the members of the committee for showing up and sharing both sides of the coin, what your thoughts are.
Thank you. Ernesto?
Thank you, John. Just want to really quickly just thank Noah for putting this comprehensive analysis of the neighborhood, and with your recommendations as well. I agree with all 3. Thank you.
Radar?
I very much appreciate Duncan's comments, which brought this process back to where it should be. It doesn't matter what we think or feel. Feelings aren't facts, right? A lot of people here felt a lot of different things, but they're facts on the page, and I heard very little to refute the facts on the page, right? A lot of work was done by Noah and his team. A lot of work was done by the persons who represent Green Acres here, the petitioners, and they presented a lot of facts. But I didn't hear anything to refute the facts that matter, the ones on which our decision is going to be made. You know, you hear, we hate students, then I heard from students, oh, we love students. And we hear low-cost housing, and we hear housing's going to increase, and all of these things which are not issues that we should consider. They're not issues that I will consider. I have a staff recommendation which cites 3 areas that meet criteria for designation. I have not heard anything to make me doubt that these facts are legit. If anybody has anything to present that would refute any of these facts here that support the criteria for, well, elevation really, to the Common Council, I'd love to hear it. But, you know, adherence, you know, maintaining focus and sticking to what we're here to do keeps me honest. You know, I'll still be fat if I don't believe what the scale says. I mean, you know, it doesn't matter what I believe. So, I'm gonna be supporting this petition based on what I've heard so far.
Thanks. Duncan, do you have any additional comments you want to make?
I said what I said in the hope that people's comments would actually create opinion about whether they think these criteria are being met. If you want to hold that to your chest until you vote, that's your business. But Sam brought up an issue that I think is critical. The criteria, you know, just so everybody knows and hears them out loud, the first one has significant character, interest, excuse me, character, interest, or value as part of the development, heritage, or cultural characteristics of the city, state, or nation. That's a big, broad area. Or is associated with a person who played a significant role in local, state, or national history. Traditionally, it doesn't exclude the fact that there might be 2 people or 6 people. It's just saying, you know, did George Washington sleep here? And C exemplifies the cultural, political, economic, social, or historic heritage of the community. And I don't think there's any question in my mind that it is certainly representative of that. Exemplifies means is an example of, and also means is a great example of. So for me, the decision would be, is it a great example of that kind of this kind of neighborhood? And under the architectural criteria, G exemplifies, again, the built environment in an era of history characterized by a distinctive architectural style. So considerations of the word exemplifies and distinctive architectural style is the second one. And hopefully you've all been in this neighborhood and looked at it and can evaluate whether you think there's a distinctive architectural style. These criteria, just for the general public, are written in a way that they're open to interpretation. The reason that they seem so general and broad is so you can think about it in the context of the issue before you. The styles of the houses in this particular neighborhood, not the styles somewhere else that you like or don't like. The street width, the landscape, the whole thing. So that's what these commissioners are pretty effective in evaluating most of the time. And that's what the issues are. And so, you know, it's not as easy as a yes or no. It's a complex neighborhood and it has a lot of things in it.
Thank you. Jeremy?
Yeah, first I want to start off with saying this is the first one that I disagreed with Noah's assessment on. That is not a knock on the quality of the report or what you put in there. Please do not think that. I looked at the same stuff that you did. I just came to a different conclusion. I think I am an advisory member. So I'm going to give you my opinion now because I can't vote. On the merits, I do not think the level of significance has been met. significance of the people listed in the petition is not focused on their homes, but work elsewhere. Most people don't associate the houses that have been referenced with those people in particular. I do not find there to be a distinctive style, as in something that is uncommon or appealing in quality in this particular area. I also find the arguments about the neighborhood's place in town development are not unique. Many neighborhoods pop up due to the increase in enrollment at IU, so I do not find that argument to be persuasive. I also just think that there are a lot of the houses are contributing, and a lot of them haven't been surveyed. There's only a handful that are notable or distinctive. That is a problem for me. I think the size of the district is way too big. I think it is overbroad. I will get into the petition stuff a little bit. I don't see a lot of positive support for this. If this goes through, it's imposing a lot of things on people who were probably against it in the first place. Honestly believe that this is a zoning issue and we do not have jurisdiction over that. People are worried about apartments and using the process to block what might happen in the future. For those reasons, I do not support the petition and recommend that the commission, and if need be, the city council, vote on not approving it.
Thank you, Chair. Karen?
I don't have any comments beyond what I said before.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any members of the public that want to make a comment? Yes, please.
Oh, this is so boring. It's called statistics. Okay, so what you have is a small sample size, but high validity. That does not negate the validity, that doesn't mean that something's good, something's bad, okay? It means that to have a broader validity, you need a larger sample size. And you've already said that, And I think the constraint of time in this whole process must have been absolutely nerve-wracking. So when you say that it doesn't have support, within the sample which was collected, it has high support. Okay, you may disagree with the size of the sample, for which there are a number of very practical reasons, one of which being the constraints of time, and also just the process in general of how this is done. As Peter said, there's no requirement, that you have an overwhelming majority of the vote in order to submit the request. And so, and people have spoken very highly of your papers, your investigation, your proposal. So I think within what you did the best you could. But misunderstanding the whole idea about how statistics prove or don't prove something, when statistics only apply to a very, very narrow selection. And that's the major failure of most surveys, is how you plan how you plan it and who you represent. So to be clear on how that functions, I think Peter gave an excellent explanation of how those things balance or don't balance, or matter or don't matter. So thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Appreciate it. Mr. Evans?
I just still go back to city code, to the language in Title 8 regarding historic designation, and look at that language and do not feel that the Historic Preservation Commission has classified all the buildings in this district yet. 206 buildings have been classified as outstanding, notable, contributing, or non-contributing. That leaves over 200, almost 260 lots here that have not been classified as either historic or non-historic, and have not been classified as either notable, outstanding, contributing, or non-contributing. The code says that that is a requirement before designating this district. Further, Article 5 of the HPC's rules and procedures. The Commission shall classify all buildings and structures within the district as outstanding, notable, contributing, or non-contributing. The report is quite comprehensive. The petition is comprehensive. There has been a good starting effort here. But even before that, we have not classified even half of the properties that are on the table here. That is where I think this commission should start. Let's get out, boots on the ground, look at every house in the neighborhood and know for sure how are these buildings classified. And that's what the code and the procedures say must be done before recommending this. Thank you.
Here's another point, if I may speak. There's another point I'd like to make about the issue of a time limit that's come up. So if you think way back to the beginning of this meeting, there were, yeah, I know, hard right. There were 5 houses that went up for demolition delay. We don't know what was gonna happen there. But basically the commission is given an option. Do you designate, do you not designate? Do you wait to get input? Those demolition delays are coming to an end on August 14th. They've been extended by 30 days. They can only be extended once. So that's sort of the time limit that we're talking about, and that, you know, for the purposes of the commission is distinct from the vote on this neighborhood. Yes, if the commission were to vote on this neighborhood designation, to send it on to city council before the expiration of those demolition delays, then those properties would be placed under interim protection until the city council has the opportunity to vote. That doesn't mean that if, for instance, on the one hand, commission decided not to vote today or not to vote to send to city council and those buildings were demolished or received a demolition permit, that the petitioners couldn't come back with a petition for some part of the neighborhood. That also doesn't mean that if city council votes no ultimately, the petitioners who came to us to demolish the buildings would be back at square one. The demolition delay period would have expired by that point. So that's just sort of, if that makes sense, that's the relationship between the time limit with those delays and the time frame that the petitioners for designation are trying to work in.
Just to piggyback on that, what Noah is, this commission has 90 days to determine the recommendation on this petition. So that there is no time constraint on this particular petition tonight. If you tie the 2 issues together, there have been some references to we were rushed. That this commission is not rushed on this particular petition for that. I want to make that clear to the commission members. There are 2 separate issues to discuss, this neighborhood and then the other demolition. They are separate issues legally. So you should treat them separately.
Okay, thanks, Margie.
Is it possible to redraw the lines that you are considering?
I think the petitioners for the district would have to resubmit a new map.
Okay.
Excuse me,
Yes, please.
Could you have a vote, just say, let's vote on the demolition, and then let's vote on whether in fact we're gonna have this neighborhood change its designation? Could be 2 votes.
There are 2 separate, I mean, I want to make sure Noah and John are clear. At the last meeting, they voted to continue the demolition delay to tonight. So in that public meeting, they said we are continuing this matter to a certain date and time, and that is going to be heard after this issue. Is that correct?
It's set on the 14th. I didn't.
Yeah.
My understanding was that we were not putting those items onto today's agenda.
So you did not continue it to tonight's meeting?
No, it's continued to the 14th.
So we have a HPC meeting on the 14th?
No, we don't. That's the end of the demolition delay period.
Okay. So if you do not, just again, I'm not trying to influence anybody's vote, just to make sure that you're clear. If this is voted no tonight, this is not passed on to the council, then that demolition delay period will expire.
Correct. So,
Could I
Yes.
ask a procedural question? So if the outcome of this vote is to nominate the district to the city council, does the interim protection for the 5 properties that spurred this whole conversation, is that inherent in that action to nominate, or do you need to take a separate and distinct action to place the properties under interim protection?
Separate.
The hand director is telling me that this was put on the agenda. So
You
that's,
vote
she
for
said to double check
demolition?
the minutes.
the vote for demolition of the properties?
Yes.
No.
But-
Yeah.
Yeah, to,
Yeah, if we pass, the
yeah,
properties go
if
to
you
interim.
pass this, obviously those then are swept up in this,
Right.
then under interim protection.
Okay, we just want to be clear on that.
But she specifically asked in the minutes, what meeting are you going to hear that? And I also thought it was continued to tonight. Do you have the minutes, Tanya?
No, I do not.
Okay, okay, so
We
we don't
have a
have those,
recording,
we have the recording.
but I have
on
not
that,
been
so-
able to,
No, that's
because I have to do my job.
That's fine. But regardless, for this particular issue of the historic, for the conservation district, that is a separate issue from a demolition. They are not intertwined matters.
Okay,
They're separate issues.
all right. Thank you, Margie.
Could you not just designate the 4 properties that were gonna be demolished as a separate historic district, separate them entirely from the Green Acres district, then take your time and do the Green Acres district, do a complete survey, since the last survey that was done was 2018, and 244 properties were never surveyed at all. Do it and do it right, and then come back and do the Green Acres petition with all the input that these people have asked for and are trying to provide to you, and then submit it to the city council instead of trying to rush through it and do it all at once.
Yes, but so again, if, in factually, if in fact, at the last meeting, they said the date and time, but again, I don't know if the petitioners for that petitioner are here tonight. Do you know if they're on Zoom? Or anybody here for this?
The 5 won't qualify separately, that's the whole point of the whole district.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the commissioners are welcome to disagree with me. And, you know, they have opportunity to as well.
So I think that let's separate the 2 issues and decide this issue. This petition stands on its own.
All right, we would need a motion to send this to city council. Who's nominated?
Okay, so
Thank you.
we have a motion and a second on HD 2403. We will take a vote. Again, reminder, this is voting members only. Marlene Newman.
She's no.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm looking at this list. It's been a long day. Ernesto Castaneda.
Yes.
Daniel Schlegel.
Yes.
Sam DeSolar.
No.
John Saunders.
Yes.
Elizabeth Mitchell.
Yes.
Bill Folk.
Yes.
Reynard Cross.
Yes.
That passes with a vote of 6 yeses, 2 nos.
So now, Margie, at this point.
There was
could
one
we-
There was a no.
There's only one no.
What no?
That was
I'm
me.
sorry.
Yeah.
Again, this is my comment.
Is that a demolition of one thing?
So there were 6 yeses and 1 no.
6 yeses and 1 no.
Yes, correct.
Can I ask a question?
Yes,
So you're
please.
passing it on to the city council, do we have the ability to write to those people?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes,
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 And
yes.
let me make clear that our code says within
adjourn
2
yet?
working
No, it's fine.
days or 2 days of this meeting, every homeowner gets a notice from the HPC that this was placed under interim protection. It's placed under interim protection until the council votes on this issue. So it is the council, city council, that will decide whether or not to make this a conservation district. This is a recommendation only. It is under interim protection though until it goes to the council. And that will certainly be a public meeting that will
Oh,
be
well,
noticed.
so we'll all know about it. Yeah, like we did this.
Well, no, I mean, that one has to be noticed 48 hours in advance. Besides, everybody that owns property will get a letter within 2 days.
That'd be awesome.
And you can write or you can attend the meeting in person. You can do both.
No, just
Thank you. Hang on, everybody. Wait, we're not done yet. Hold on. Hold on, wait.
All right, hold on, the meeting's not adjourned.
We're not adjourned yet.
We're the public, we don't need to be here.
No, you're right.
For all of you.
Okay. All right, thank you. Thank you. All right. So at this point, we have to decide do we want to have interim protection.
Yes, if you want it to happen in 2 phases, right. Make
Right.
it, if you want it to be under.
Okay. And then we take a vote for that. All right.
Yes.
So at this point, we need a motion to move interim protection against, for those 5 properties. So, did I say that right, Margie? Yeah.
So
Okay.
that you are placing the
You're
neighborhood and the
placing-
5 properties
Right,
under protection.
exactly. Did everybody hear that? Replace the neighborhood and 5 properties.
It's all of the neighborhood, actually.
Yeah, it's all the neighborhood.
Just give me a minute.
We want to make sure our procedures are correct.
Yeah.
Sorry, who seconds?
There hasn't been a second yet.
Bernard's second.
Okay.
And Elizabeth made it, all right.
Someone wants to help me with the correct wording. I'm seeing that there's a motion to move the neighborhood into interim protection. Is that accurate?
The proposed conservation district.
Thank you. And we have a second, and maybe I'll wait until they're done talking. Oh, I understand. I want to make sure that they're.
Well, there's 500.
And some night.
How's that do?
Causing me not to lose my favorite. No,
We are voting on interim protection for the neighborhood and those 5 properties. That's what we're voting on.
Can you say the motion again?
Yes, Elizabeth?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, it's a,
Did I make the motion?
No, Reynard did, but
Reynard.
I just want to make sure I have the correct wording of the
Yeah.
motion.
We're moving to put the, yes.
The map as defined in the application by the petitioners.
Right, okay. And that includes, yes.
And that includes 5.
Right.
Okay. And then there was a second one.
Elizabeth
Mitchell.
seconded?
So now we're gonna vote, and the vote is on the motion to move the map as defined into interim protection.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. So Ernesto Castaneda,
Yes.
Daniel Schlegel,
Yes.
Sam DeSoler,
I'm going to abstain.
okay, John Saunders,
Yes.
Elizabeth Mitchell.
Yes.
Bill Folk,
Yes.
Reynard Cross.
Yes.
And that passes with 6 yes and 1 abstention.
Okay. Excellent. Do we have any more public comments or announcements at this time?
I'm not seeing anything on Zoom.
All right. Then I call for adjournment.
Oh, we got, oh, no.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Did I miss something?
No, somebody raised their hand.
Okay.
Oh,
I don't see it. No.
I did not see that. Sorry.
I don't see it. All right. So, having no more comments at this time, I'm going to call for adjournment for this evening. Thank you.
Okay, meeting is adjourned.
Thank you
8:05
for
PM.
everybody coming.